All right, good evening everyone, and welcome to the January 4th, 2024 Litchfield Budget Committee meeting. Call the meeting to order, and we'll start tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Happy New Year, everyone. Hope everyone had a good holiday break, a good New Year, stayed healthy, all of the above. Winter is here. It is cold today, and sounds like snow's coming. So thanks for everybody joining tonight or watching live. We've got a full agenda tonight. We'll start with any review or additions to tonight's agenda. I do have one item. And I shared it, I believe, in the email that I sent just a little bit ago as it pertains to our voting for this evening. And thanks to Miss Douglas for kind of pointing this out to me. Per our bylaws, we and I've shared this with the school folks, which I know they'll be here later this evening. So tonight we're just going to vote on the town warrant articles. The school warrant articles, since they haven't formally been presented to us at one of our meetings, we're going to do that tonight. I know many of us have either attended the meeting, asked questions, watched virtually. Tonight will be just an opportunity on the school warrant articles. We'll see some numbers that were presented last night at the school board meeting, have opportunities to ask additional questions of Dr. Jetty and Mr. Totten. And then we will vote on the school warrant articles immediately following the budget hearing next Thursday. Okay? So that's the only change to tonight's agenda. At this time, I will open it up for public input. Good evening, sir. Good evening. State your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, Ronald Winters, 15 Urban Circle. And what I wanted to discuss is something that came up at the school board meeting on the 21st. And it was related to what the school board could do within their budget as far as moving things around or hiring employees and such. And I think it has to do with warrant articles that were published or voted on back in March of 2003 and 2004. And if you'd like, I'll just read them for points of clarification, and I would just like to offer what I think is an opinion of how they should be used and give some support to the school board about how I think they should be able to function. So anyway, the first petition article that was voted on in March of 2003 reads, as a community operating under State Bill 2 RSA 40:13, we support the Litchfield School Board creating separate warrant articles for new positions, increased hours of staff, new equipment, and architectural work. The Litchfield School Board will then be continuing past practice to provide voters with greater choice on increases in school spending. This is a petition warrant article. The second article, or it's actually called Article 21 instead of a warrant article, titled Article 21 with the date of March 2004. Shall the Litchfield School District support the school board in placing in the operating budget those positions agreed to by the Budget Committee that are needed to meet the minimum state and federal standards or to maintain services at current year levels? This is a non-binding advisory warrant article. So I'd like to speak to the first one. And what prompted my coming to offer an opinion is the discussion that the school board had about, and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, a special needs position that had been identified that needed to be filled. And apparently there became a debate whether it's a new position or just what. And then the discussion apparently got referred back to this warrant article. And what I want to suggest here is that as I read this warrant article again, I actually don't even remember how I voted upon it. It was so long ago, to be quite truthful. But the intent, as I read it today, is in the last, or next to the last sentence, and the words "increase in school spending," inferring that if they do something that increases their approved operating budget, then that has to be approved. They can't arbitrarily go above their agreed operating budget. But I believe, in fact, the lawyer has added legal opinions. They're charged with maintaining the regulations and using the budget to provide an education. So my position would be, this warrant article says to me is that during the year, if they have needs to move positions around, add or subtract, that this is still within the spirit of this warrant article. And this position that they've been struggling with should not have to wait until they can get a warrant article to approve something of this nature. So that's what I just want to offer support. I don't know what the proper way to do that is, but that's just my opinion and my recommendation. What I want to offer as an example is my wife taught in the middle school. She was hired as an English teacher. And 2 years in, they needed to add a math teacher. And they asked her if she'd fill that position, and she did. So it was simply, in fact, if I remember right, they reduced the English because they wanted to increase the math side. So there was no increase in their budget, as the wording in here is. There was changes in staffing as far as the number of math teachers versus English teachers, but it was within the context of their approved budget. And so I think that's the past practice. I have read into this is that they were able to do that, and that's what they should be able to continue to do. So anyway, that's just my observation, recommendation, and for what it's worth.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, and I know in reading that was a public document that was a part of the December school board meeting. You know, if you read the 2003 article and then you read the 2004 article, they contradict each other.
Right.
And it's hard, I think, to point to which one is kind of governing the way we operate. I think as a budget committee, I know we had conversations back in December that in the spring, our goal is to have a conversation and discussion on how we move forward with this and come up with some best practices on how do we operate when it comes to both on the town and the school side. When it comes to adding positions, what is our stance on that, and how do we take both the 2003 and the 2004 warrant articles into consideration for that? So I appreciate you sharing that tonight.
If I can just kind of respond to that a little bit. The 2004 article, I read it, I have no idea what it means.
I don't believe that they actually do contradict each other. The whole point, my understanding, and as I've spoken to a lot of them, is in this situation where you need a math teacher, you're maintaining a same level of service
Reallocating.
by putting someone in there. If, however, you add a new position, you're increasing service. So in the case of the elementary school where population increases, we need a new teacher. That's not a new position because by definition, it's the same level of service. You have so many kids to so many classrooms, same level of service. So to me, I don't see them as contradictory, I see them as complementary. So.
My only point is I read Article 21, I don't even know what it means. I can't interpret it.
Okay.
That's why I didn't
I
even
appreciate
address it.
that.
Because
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for coming. And welcome to the School Facilities Committee, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, any other public input this evening? Seeing none, we'll close public input. We'll have another session towards the end of our meeting. Next on the agenda is correspondence. We have quite a lengthy correspondence since our last meeting on December 14th. It was an active holiday season. Thanks to Ms. Stevens for pulling us together, and I'll read these into the record. On December 15th, Ronald Blinas requested information on the current bonds owed by the town and the school district, as well as any anticipated balloon payments. Mr. Sun responded to him with that information. On December 17th, Recording Secretary Matthew Sullivan shared the draft December 12th meeting minutes. On December 18th, Town Administrator Kim Kleiner gave answers to committee questions asked during the December 12th meeting. She also noted that the 2024 town budget increased $4,455 for library health cost. On December 19th, Ronald Blinas provided further comments regarding the elementary school project. On December 20th, Chair Sun reminded the committee of the joint school board meeting and budget committee session within the December 21st school board meeting. Member Brian Burke remarked that he did not see the warrant articles on the agenda. Chair Sun responded where to find the warrant article information. On December 21st, Chair Sun forwarded the school board FY25 default budget. Also on December 21st, School Board Rep Andrew Cutter shared the December 21st Business Administrator's Report. And also on December 21st, Chair Sun forwarded documents shared at the joint school board session regarding the elementary school project. On December 22nd, Gail Behringer expressed appreciation for Mr. Oblinas's and the committee's comments and questions during the joint school board warrant article session. Chair Sun responded with thanks. On December 23rd, Ron Oblinas provided revised comments regarding the elementary school project. On December 26th, Ms. Kleiner regretfully informed the interim chief, Mike French, had passed after a brief illness. Chief French had retired as police chief of Goffstown, where he had begun his career in 1973, and dedicated his last year to the Litchfield Police Department. Our deepest sympathies to his wife and his family. Also on December 26th, Ron Oblinas requested information on the 2003 and 2004 warrant articles regarding new positions. On December 27th, Ms. Kleiner regretfully shared details of services for Chief French. On December 28th, Chair Sun forwarded the January 4th meeting agenda. On January 3rd, Mr. Cutter gave details of the Litchfield Education Association and Litchfield Support Staff Association contracts. And then finally today on January 4th, Chair Sun shared town warrant articles and school warrant articles for voting and review this evening. That captures our correspondence. Next, we have review and acceptance of minutes from December 14th. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those minutes?
Motion to accept the minutes as written.
A motion from Mr. Burke. Have a second from Ms. Douglas. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries 9-0-0. All right, before we get into warrant articles, we'll do quick town and school business. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Leary for updates from the town and any questions on the town side, and then we'll do the same for Mr. Cutter and then move into our warrant articles. Mr. Leary.
Well, I think you know most of it. We're not carrying a warrant article for the water right now because it's not. We're waiting to find out with the rate. Penachuk filed a rate case with the state, and we don't have the details on that yet. So,
Appreciate you taking the time to fully flesh out the proposal.
No pun intended.
Flesh out, not flush out, flesh out. Determine what we're looking at before we actually ask voters to commit.
and you know about Mr. French, which is sad. And one thing about last night going to the service was he really liked Litchfield in a short time here, talking to his family. I mean, when I mentioned that I was from Litchfield, they all just kind of lit up and was saying how he liked it here and stuff. So it's sad. However, we have a new police chief starting Monday. Chief Jones will be sworn in, and also Sergeant Tessier will be promoted to captain on Monday as well. So things are on the rebound for the police department. And other than that, just the Veterans Pavilion is pretty much completed. Just some cosmetic things being done, picnic tables and benches, and ready for dedication in the spring.
Great. Questions for Mr. Leary this evening?
Hope I didn't forget anything.
Just back on the water for a moment.
Yep.
Penachuk files for rate increases all the time, right? So how can we have any degree of certainty that maybe next year we can move forward with something if they continue to file rate cases, or rate increases, excuse me?
Feel free, Ms. Kleiner.
I think the one thing that was in the presentation that they showed us was that if they do what we think they're gonna do, which is combine Penachuk East and West, it's gonna give us a temporary drop in your water price. However, by year 2 or 3, you're gonna go back up over where you would have been. But we don't know that for certain, and to bring something forward when we don't have everything to be able to answer the taxpayers is wrong. Am I close?
Absolutely. So the rate case that Penachuk has filed is much different than normal rate cases. As Selectman Leary said, it would combine Pennachuck East, Pittsfield Adjunct, and Pennachuck Corp., which is the city of Nashua. The Department of Energy filed an injunction, and they are saying that to file a rate case, basically summarizing, to file a rate case combining the three agencies is unlawful. So they've put a hold on the rates, and there's much more discussion to come. So unfortunately, not knowing where the rates are going, it's impossible for the town to kind of flesh out that base rate.
Flesh out, not flesh out.
And so our consultants, and speaking with legal, we thought it's best to hold off. We should have some answers over the coming months. The town is going to intervene and will be involved in the conversation, as will, I'm sure, the Department of Energy. The town of Bedford had filed, so there's some other towns that are looking at it. But we need that base number to be able to properly determine for the Litchfield ratepayers what their savings would be.
Thank you. Any other questions for the town outside of our warrant discussions? Okay. Turn it over to Mr. Cutter. Updates from the school outside of our warrant discussions this evening.
Yeah, so I have a few different items just to talk about. Some of these we'll certainly address as we get into the warrant review later this evening. But just to recap, and I'm going to go back to the board meeting on December 21st. So just before the Christmas break, right, on December 21st, the board did vote unanimously to return the land purchase money of $497,000 back to the taxpayers. That will be returned at the end of our school year when that warrant lapses. So 497 going back. You're going to see some of those numbers reflected as we present the operating and default budgets tonight, and specifically as you look at the tax impact, you'll actually see negative tax impacts.
No, I know, and what I don't like about that is that it's an artificial negative, and that really aggravates me. So we're gonna go down this year. We're not gonna have that savings next year, and boom, way back up again. So it just. Thank you for returning the money.
I don't make up the math on how that works,
No,
right? So December 21st, the board also voted unanimously to increase lunch rates by 75 cents. I know this specific committee, we had some discussion about lunch prices and the deficits that we were projecting for food service. It is no longer going to be referred to as self-funded because it's not.
We're expanding services,
we have increased the lunch rates by 75 cents.
but now require taxpayer funding that was not previously.
I wouldn't say it's increasing services, it's maintaining the services that we had at an increased cost because of inflation.
When we move,
Because of increased costs.
but when we move from self-funding to not self-funding, we've changed the level of service. Let's be honest. I
disagree with that
understand you have to toe a line and you have a position you have to present. But when we go from self-funding to not self-funding, we've changed the service.
What service did we add? Just out of curiosity.
We went from not having to subsidize to
That's
having
not
to
changing the
subsidize.
service.
It's
No.
not
It's not
It's
changing the
changing the
service.
level of.
No, it's changing the
Okay.
cost, but it's not changing the service. The service
It's still
is
coming out
exactly
of
the
tax
same.
dollars because it's always come out of
Mr.
tax
Chairman,
dollars.
if I may, right,
ahead.
we're gonna get more into this a little bit later this evening because I believe that the school will be presenting some additional information as it relates to the food service deficit and that we projected in our budget. The board did, our projection, even with the rate increase, modified that $100,000 number that was in the budget. Even with the rate increase, it would still be $35,000 more than that, is what our projection is. So the board voted, because it's a known cost at this point, based upon our forecasts, to increase that food service deficit from $100,000 to $135,000. But there's gonna be some additional discussion a little bit later this evening on that, so stay tuned. Yesterday, the board met as well, and we had a couple of updates to share with you. Certainly, and no surprise, this is a contract year for our Litchfield Education Association, the teacher contract. The board unanimously voted in support of our teachers in the LEA contract. I think it's a very beneficial contract to the town. I think it's a very responsible contract for the town. The rate increases are very much in line with the rate increases that we saw on the police department side. It's a 5% increase for year one and 4.75% increase for year two. We shared those contracts with you, so hopefully you had a chance to take a look at that.
You just do 2 years again?
It's a 2-year contract.
I will say, and I did look at the initial percentages, but I'd also note that there were some substantial returns and substantial changes on the health benefits of the police department in calculating that 5%. So they got the raise, but their health benefits also decreased a bit. I didn't see the same.
Teachers
give
did
and
that a
take.
few years ago, Karen.
Yeah, we're not changing health
I'm just saying,
policies at
so
this
I
time.
appreciate the comparison. I don't think it's apples to apples.
In addition to that, the superintendent certainly read into the board minutes. I won't spare the time this evening to do that, but we have a large number of job openings within the school district. I know I read them into the minutes a few months ago at this point. That being said, there's a number of open positions. I think really what that highlights is most of those positions are related to our support staff. And so with that, and the increasing difficulty it is to fill support staff positions, the board has had lots of conversation at our recent meetings about what to do about that. Ultimately, what the board agreed to was to put out a 1-year contract increase for fiscal year '25 to increase the support staff salaries. That wage increase was sent over to the budget committee last night as well. A couple things to note with that is that it is intended to be retroactive back to January 1st of 2024, using the open position budget that we have in our operating budget right now. So we have a number of vacancies. We have, I think it's around $600,000 in unfilled positions in our current operating budget, and we want to use some of that to return the money or pay the people who are doing the hard work for the shortages. So there's that. And in addition to that, the new appropriation for the taxpayer would be specifically for FY25. Next year is actually the contract year for the support staff, so this will be up for negotiation again next year.
So on that point, if you're gonna go ahead and make a change to the support staff by utilizing unfilled positions, at what point are you going to eliminate the unfilled positions to be able to afford this increase now in future years?
Well, geez, I certainly recall a budget committee action reducing our unfilled positions by $240,000, which I think really ties our hands pretty seriously.
Really? How much did
I
we
think that's
did we
true.
underspend last year? Just ballpark?
Any additional updates, Mr. Cutter?
So LEA, LSSA, job postings, lunch, I think that's enough for right now.
Okay. Any additional questions for Mr. Cutter on these items?
Do you just wanna go back to the food service side of things? How much of the additional breakfast that was added to LMS put the food services into this deficit situation?
I have no clue.
Because that would be an expansion of services. You did not offer breakfast at
Breakfast,
LMS,
yeah.
and then you added breakfast at LMS, so that would be a change in service.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
And
Yeah.
did we follow up on the recommendation or suggestion about possibly revamping the schedule to include, or the menu to include less costly?
Yeah, I noticed,
Offerings?
you mentioned it last night and my kids noticed, my oldest noticed.
Look,
it
we
this
we
week.
noticed it, right? I noticed it as a parent,
Yeah,
right?
as a parent, I noticed
we-
it as
We
well.
certainly brought it up in the school board meeting last night. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but there was certainly a pizza change, right, to the school menu, where Gil's Pizza, which is one of our more costly meals, right, because it's outsourced to a company who supplies the pizza, but also one of our highest revenue-driven meals, because the vast majority of kids will buy that lunch. There was a change to that now that it's offered every other week instead of every week. So I don't know if that was intentional. We were going to look into that. But
Well, I thought there was a discussion of possibly like pasta or some other things that not always like doing, heavy.
today's lunch was pasta.
Oh, fine, but like,
I did notice it's about once a week now. I don't know if it was before.
okay, I'm just saying like, yes, there's an opportunity to increase. We can discuss whether or not it's an appropriate level of an increase, but there's an opportunity to
understand.
increase the fee, but have we also looked at the expense side?
We have, and we continue to.
Anything else from Mr. Cutter this evening?
I'm sure there will be.
Sure there will be. All right, moving into new business, we're going to transition to town warrant article voting at this time. As Ms. Kleiner and Ms. White come up front, I do want to call your attention to, and I'll put it's on the portal, the 2024 budget document, and where we are as it pertains to the tax cap. We are currently, as of this moment, $100,999 under the tax cap, without any votes on any warrant articles that we're going to discuss this evening. There are 5 warrant articles that have a tax impact for this upcoming year. If we were to approve all of those, that would put us approximately $94,000 over the tax cap. So as we move through these tonight, that's something to keep in mind, that we're legally obligated to stay under the tax cap as it stands.
Yep. Well, I will tell you, before we even get into it, I think Article 10, because it's a replacement of a cruiser, and I believe that should be in the operating budget anyway, would be one of the ones that would obtain my support, and that is a significant chunk of that 100,000.
When you said would obtain your support?
I would vote in favor of the police cruiser because I firmly believe we need to return back to our replacement schedule, and it should be as part of the operating budget and not as a warrant article. I think we need to return to our regular replacement schedule. It was pulled out because we wanted to get under a tax cap.
Correct.
I believe that it was pulled out because we had problems with the tax cap last year. Expanding or increasing the percentage in order to, the 5% in order to maintain and better provide for our town. I believe that this should have gone back into the operating budget. So this would be one of the ones I would vote in favor of because I believe it should be in it should be within the tax cap.
And that's the largest ticket item,
And
too.
that is the big one, so.
I mean, you can
All right.
make the same
Sorry,
case
Mr.
for-
Chairman, can you repeat the amount?
Yes,
that is
so it's
under
actually,
the tax cap, but then also could you let us know as far as what that percentage rate increase is? Because I would like to see how that's referenced to
when you say
old
percentage.
tax cap, which was a 3% increase.
Yeah, so I actually have that on my budget slides, which I am in the process of finishing for next week. So, we're currently $100,999 under the tax cap. Our current budget, as it sits today, is 2.85% over the 2023 approved budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, so with that, and before we actually start on the Article 3 operating budget, I did want to give Ms. Kleiner just a minute because I reshared that document with you today. There was a small change to Article 3 operating budget since the last time we looked at it. So I'll let Ms. Kleiner speak to that before we start voting.
Good evening. There was a small change to the operating budget at the Board of Selectmen's last meeting. There were 2 contracts and a potential new hire that were adjusted for. So you'll find under the Board of Selectmen tab, I highlighted the number of the town administrator contract was approved. Under police, there's both the hiring of the new police chief and the contract with the new police captain. And so those 3 figures actually netted in a savings to the town of $5,722.
So since thank you, Ms. Kleiner. So since that number, that $7,895,386, is actually down $5,000 from the last time that we looked at this. And so in case there were any, questions on the discrepancies, I wanted Ms. Kleiner to share that. So our process for tonight, I will read the warrant articles. You'll be able to see the votes by the Board of Selectmen are in the document as well. I'll entertain motions, and then we'll have discussions, and then we will add the recommended or not recommended by the Budget Committee to these warrant articles. We'll start, and again, we're only going to vote on warrant articles that have a tax impact. You'll find, I believe it's Articles 12 and 13 at the bottom, do not have tax impact, so we will not be voting on those tonight. Article 3, operating budget. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth in the budget, posted with the warrant or as amended by the vote of the first session, for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $7,895,386. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $7,874,828, which is the same as last year, with certain adjustments required by previous town action of the town of Litchfield or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 4013, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. The estimated 2024 tax rate impact is 13 cents. This was recommended by the Board of Selectmen 3-0-0. I'll entertain any motions.
I make a motion to recommend.
Motion by Mr. Barca,
Second.
second by Mr. Burke. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll roll call vote these just for the record. Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Aye.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
and Mr. Burke.
Yes.
Recommended by the budget, so Article 3, operating budget, recommended by the Budget Committee, 9-0-0. That was the easy one. Article 4, Human Services and Health Agencies. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $22,350 to support human services and health agencies providing services to the town of Litchfield? Estimated 2024 tax rate impact is 2 cents. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen 4-0-0.
Make a motion to recommend.
Motion by Mr. Burke,
Second.
second by Mr. Taylor. Discussion.
What is the tax cap limit again?
Um,
That's available.
Currently, we are at $100,999. As you recall, just as a reminder, since this is pretty much the same group as last year, when we came to this article, I believe last year, we went back and revisited the town budget in order to support it. I'm certainly not suggesting that right now. I'm just reminding everyone that if we find ourselves in a position of wanting to support certain warrant articles, it doesn't preclude us from going back and revisiting the town budget if we need to. Any discussion on Article 4? Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
See, I'm torn here because if I vote yes here, I can't vote yes on other ones. Well, I'm voting no because of the tax cap.
Okay, I am a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
and Mr. Burke.
Yes.
All right, that is recommended, Article 4, recommended by the Budget Committee, 8-1-0. Article 5, plow truck lease purchase. Actually, before I do that, we are now currently $78,649 under the tax cap, assuming Article 4 were to pass. Article 5, plow truck lease purchase. To see if the town will vote to authorize the selectmen to enter into a 6-year lease purchase agreement for the sum of $177,402 for the purpose of lease purchasing a plow truck with equipment and attachments for the highway department, and to raise and appropriate the sum of $29,567 for the first year's payment for that purpose. The first year's payment in the amount of $29,567 shall come from the unassigned fund balance and no amount to be raised from taxation. This lease agreement contains an escape clause. Estimated 2024 tax rate impact is $0. Estimated tax impact for 2025 is 2 cents. There is a table that lays out the payments for each of those 6 years, which is the same, $29,567 for a total of $177,402. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400. As a reminder, this has no tax impact for this upcoming year, so it does not impact where we are with the tax cap. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend.
Motion by Mr. Burke, second by Mr. Taylor. Any discussion?
So we're already getting one plow, right, from the grant money?
That is correct.
Okay.
So we did receive the grant paperwork, which will have to go to the Board of Selectmen for approval. That does require a 20% match, which we are recommending to the board to take out of the Public Works Expendable Trust Fund. So that will reduce that fund by approximately $58,000.
Additional discussion.
So this is the truck that's going to be instead of the $90,000 truck option that we had.
Yes. So part of the issue when the road agent and I went back and looked at it is the information that we gave CIP was an incredibly old quote. So I think had we worked with that, we would have had issues, and so my apologies on that. The other part of it was that didn't include fit up of this includes the plows, all the accessories, and is very comparable to the truck that we had in the lease.
So the one for $90,000, that was a different truck model, correct?
It was.
Outdated and didn't include all the
Yes.
equipment.
It was very outdated.
So what are we gonna be able to do with a more expensive truck that we couldn't do with a less expensive truck?
So this truck will perform basically everything. We will be able to plow, we will be able to, it will have all the attachments that the other quote did not provide.
I understand this truck is much more versatile than the F-350.
Yeah, I
Where
just
you can
wanted
put
to be
something
able
on the
to,
bed, you can take it off, and
yeah, I just wanted to be able to quantify that for, the taxpayers, what would be the advantage? What are we picking up?
so Kim, do you know roughly, I know 90,000 was probably 4 years ago or 3 years ago, that quote, so I'm certain that's escalated. But any idea, I mean, like how much to equip that with everything, what it would cost now?
The 350?
Yeah.
No, but I can certainly find out. I do know that when the road agent and I looked at it, and we had to go back when we were finalizing the numbers with the lease company, we had to go back and ask for even an updated quote from the one we got a couple months ago. Truck prices are changing very rapidly.
I would venture to guess that the truck itself is probably like 25,000 more than it was when that thing was put in, just for the
Yes,
truck.
and depending upon the attachments, I mean, this could come in lower. But we need to go high because we need to prepare for the lease. And so we certainly don't want to take any chances that we can't fit the lease under what's approved by the taxpayers. So they estimate the cost of all those attachments and everything when they're preparing a quote. I do know that when he looked at one point, a truck very similar to the 350 that was purchased after this quote was given, it was up to like 130. So, I mean, it's the truck prices, the one we're getting in the grant is $299,000.
Any additional?
I do actually have a question. So I get concerned about more and more, you know, bills piling up. We're getting a truck via the grant. When does the communications tower lease end, and how much do we pay per year? So in other words, when the tax impact of 2025, is that replacing the communication tower, or do we still have the communication tower lease cost in 2025 as well?
I believe in 2025 we have it.
Yeah, I think
It's the last year. It's the
And-
last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 2025 is we still have to make a communications tower payment in 2025?
Yes, it's in under, I think it's under general government.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional discussion, Article 5? All right, seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
No.
Mr. Barca,
No.
and Mr. Burke.
Yes.
And so that is recommended by the Budget Committee by a vote of 7-0. Okay, Article 6. As a reminder, we are still $78,649 under the tax cap. Article 6, additional assistant librarian hours. Shall the town vote to increase the weekly hours of the assistant librarian number 2 position from 8 hours per week to 24 hours per week, effective April 1st, 2024, for an estimated annual wage, benefit, and other related cost of $14,563, and further vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $10,696 for wage, benefit, and other related cost for the period of April 1st, 2024 to December 31st, 2024. Estimated 2024 tax rate impact is 1 cent. There is a table below that which shows the wages and benefits breakdown for 2024 as well as 2025 that adds up to those two numbers mentioned in the article. This was recommended by the Board of Selectmen 3-0-0. Do I have a motion?
Motion to recommend.
I have a motion by Mr. Leary,
Second.
second by Ms. Stevens. Discussion.
This was brought forth last year, wasn't it?
That is correct.
I think it was brought forth because it was outside of the Board of Selectmen, it was outside of the tax cap, I believe.
Yeah, it got
It was-
voted down
it
by
was
the
way
taxpayers, yeah.
No, I'm just saying, we,
Or-
We were
because
over the cap.
This isn't going from part-time to full-time, right?
No.
We wouldn't normally put an employee's hours going from part-time to part-time on a warrant.
this is increasing the hours. This was what was on the warrant, I thought we voted on this last year too.
We did, but they had pulled it out of the operating budget because we couldn't support the operating budget with it.
No, I know, I'm just saying, I thought.
But
we-
but that's not commonplace to
No, a part-timer is
take.
hours vary.
Exactly,
Yeah.
to put that to a warrant. So I
It's a
appreciate-
significant increase, though.
I appreciate
It was the thing to do.
the added choice. I just feel like it was just a carryover from last year, when maybe it didn't need to be.
I think they were added this year, and we removed them, didn't we?
Sorry?
To the budget.
It was, it was a warrant. We did remove,
Or did they not
No,
put it
it wasn't
forward?
removed this year.
Wasn't
It was
removed this
something
year?
like
No.
8,000 that we removed.
yeah, we only cut like 6,000, I think, from the library budget.
It wasn't proposed in the operating budget
Right.
this year.
That's right.
Okay.
But
think
I
it was
certainly
carried over.
understand what you're saying.
Mhm.
It could have been just an increase in that salary line, but that, it wasn't proposed that way.
Right. I
Yeah,
think
to
it
your
was just a
point,
carryover
they added it last year as a warrant article because we cut it from the budget.
because
and that
of the
was-
tax cap.
And that was the process that they saw to get it added back in.
Right.
Yep.
So, I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again, the library is hearing the demand for extra services and they need the people to support it. Same as the highway department, same as the police department. Just how it goes.
I see the value for sure. I struggle with getting these numbers to add up and
I keep trying to
Getting
add
us
all-
where we
add
need
all
to
the
be.
different ones together.
I know.
They keep going over.
and trying to prioritize the police contract, the cruiser, the highway worker, and the librarian hours. Like, that's where I am right now. It's not that I don't see value in any of these. It's trying to prioritize from a dollars and cents standpoint in the tax cap.
That's right. But they did ask for this last year, and and it was denied, so I can understand why they would come back and continue to ask for it when it's a need.
Was the vote close by the town? I don't
I'm not
recall.
sure. I'm not sure about that.
Additional discussion.
I appreciate their request. I appreciate it going through the warrant process. I think that, I think that is the appropriate way to do it. I appreciate the use of the process.
I do as well, and I think my vote will simply reflect keeping us under the tax cap.
Same. I'll personally vote for it in the booth, but
I agree.
just here I can't make the numbers work.
I agree on that.
So how are you making the numbers work?
I don't know.
It's gonna get
Yeah.
It's gonna get dicey.
I personally want to do the police contract and the highway worker, but with the Health and Human Services, that they don't work.
Correct.
And don't forget, we got the reevaluation.
How close?
That was no impact.
It
was
has
it?
no
Last year?
tax impact.
Oh,
Oh, no.
25?
It's spinning.
Any additional discussion on Article 6?
Well, just that we can't do both the police contract and the highway
here we
worker,
go.
or
That is
the
correct.
police contract and the
That is
cruiser.
You can, you're just gonna have to cut the budget.
Correct.
That's true.
You can do anything you wanna do.
All right. Seeing no additional discussion on Article 6, we will vote.
Yes, I would like to know what the vote was.
Oh, you were pulling that?
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
It took a minute. Yes, 647, no, 687.
That was close.
That was really close.
Extremely close. And they also provide a lot of services to people that can't afford to go elsewhere.
Was that dollar amount? Was the ask for the dollar amount similar?
The dollar amount for a full year was 13,312. For the partial year, starting April 1st, was 9,920.
So it's not bad.
I would strongly encourage, if this is not recommended by the Budget Committee, strongly encourage the library and the Library Board of Trustees to get out and advocate for this and really highlight the new pavilion that's there as opportunities and needs for these hours. All right, I will call for a vote. This is Article 6. Mr. Hayes,
No.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
No.
I am a no. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
No.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. Burke.
No.
That is not recommended by the Budget Committee by a vote of 4-5-0. Article 7, Property Reevaluation Expendable Trust Fund. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate $25,000 to be placed in the Property Reevaluation Expendable Trust Fund as previously established? This sum is to come from the unassigned fund balance and no amount to be raised from taxation. Estimated 2024 tax rate impact $0.00. Recommended by Board of Selectmen 4-1-0.
Motion to recommend.
I have a motion by Mr. Taylor,
I'll second.
second by Ms. Stevens. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Leary.
Yes.
Threw me off there. Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
and Mr. Burke.
Yes.
That is recommended by the Budget Committee by a vote of 9-0-0. Article 8, to establish a recreation expendable trust fund. To see if the town will vote to establish a recreation expendable trust fund per RSA 3119A for the maintenance and repair of recreation equipment, facilities, and systems, and to raise and appropriate the sum of $25,000 to be placed in the fund. Further, to name the selectmen as agents to expend from the fund. This sum is to come from the unassigned fund balance and no amount to be raised from taxation. Estimated 2024 tax rate impact $0.00. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen 4-0-0. Motion?
Motion to recommend.
A motion by Mr. Leary,
I'll second.
second by Ms. Stevens. Discussion.
Why wouldn't this be expended by the rec committee? Why would this be Board of Selectmen?
Expendable trust.
Because it's the trust fund
Because the rec committee operates at the will of the
The-
Board of Selectmen, I
of the
believe.
board.
I appreciate the creation of the trust. It's needed.
I remember our discussion was it enough money? But
I didn't think it was, but I think it's a good starting point.
yep.
I think I support the various departments looking forward to this. It kills me when we're always like reactionary in our responses as opposed to being able to have these funds available to address them in a proactive way. Because when you're making reactive decisions, they often cost more.
Any additional discussion? Article 8. All right, call for a vote. Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
No.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
and Mr. Burke.
Yes.
Recommended by the Budget Committee by a vote of 8-1-0. All right, Article 9, and I'll do a quick recap. We are still $78,649 under the tax cap. Article 9, Police Contract. Shall the town vote to approve the cost items for wage and related costs that have been included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the town of Litchfield and Council 93 of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, which provides for the following increases in wages and benefits at the current staffing level, and further to raise and appropriate the sum of $42,012 for the current fiscal year. Such sum representing the additional cost attributable to the increase in salaries and benefits required by the new agreement over those that would be paid at current staffing levels. Estimated 2024 tax rate impact is 3 cents. There's a table, there's a link to additional information, which I believe is a link to the contract. There's a table below that which shows the monies being raised 2024, $42,012, 2025, $39,794, and 2026, $36,860. This was recommended by the Board of Selectmen 4-0-0. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to recommend.
Motion by Mr. Burke.
Second.
Second by Mr. Taylor. Discussion.
So I want to say, at first I was a little surprised by the percentages. I'm like, whoa. But I do appreciate that they're included in this are structural changes to how we're handling healthcare benefits with the buybacks. And while it's not where I'd like it to be, it's at least moving in the right direction. So for me, while I balk at the large percentages, I also recognize some of it's paid for through those changes. So I appreciate that conversation and looking at that, and hopefully it's more of a long-term conversation. But my initial reaction was, but I'm looking at it more. I'm willing to support it because of the other changes involved. So thank you for all those who were involved in the negotiation. Thank you for the police for all the service, but I also think it's respectful of the taxpayers in that way. A little negotiation, give and take. There's a little bit of both in this one, so I appreciate that.
Thank you. I would like to note that if the contract does not pass, the town will owe, because of the MOU, owe an additional little over $8,700 because the buyout will revert back to the old structure. I also want to thank the unaffiliated employees, town hall staff, who also had their buyouts adjusted, and employees going forward, coming into the town or the union, will take a significant reduction in the buyout of their health.
Additional discussion.
Also, members of this board that have been on for a few years will remember that the police were probably the most approachable when it came to changing their contracts and being town-friendly. Their last contract was very low. It was a very small, they deferred their raise so that we could meet constraints in the budget during COVID. So I think this is more than well earned by them, and they've just been over the top acceptable to the town as far as working with us to stay within the budget lines and whatnot.
Additional discussion. I think for me, it comes down to, people over equipment. And I will support this because I want to support our people, and make sure that, hopefully help make sure that this passes at the polls. All right, any final discussion? All right, call for vote. Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas,
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
and Mr. Burke.
Yes.
Recommended by the Budget Committee by a vote of 9-0-0. All
Jessica
right.
has support the cruiser now. Thanks.
Article 10, just to recap where we are now. Apologies, I lost my place.
That is
We are, oh, now my math's really off. We are 35,000, I'm gonna have to do some math, sorry.
I got 36,637.
I believe you, I trust you. 25,941 plus 10,696. Yep, 36,637, is that what you said?
That makes voting the next couple
We
ones
are
easy.
currently $36,637 under the tax cap. Just as a reminder, our next two items have a tax impact of greater than those two numbers. Article 10, replacement of one police cruiser. To raise and appropriate the sum of $70,000 to purchase and equip one new police model cruiser. Selection and purchase of said vehicle to be the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen in their discretion, if determined to be necessary and in the best interest of the town. Purchase of said vehicle to be by competitive bidding. Estimated 2024 tax impact is 6 cents, recommended by the Board of Selectmen 4-0-0. Do I have a motion?
Motion to recommend.
Motion by Ms. Douglas, second by Mr. Burke. Discussion.
What does it mean if determined to be necessary and in the best interest of the town? That is, I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that kind of phrase. Like, I would assume that by putting this on here, we feel it's in the best interest of the town, so why are we?
So one of the issues, and we just faced this, in the past couple of weeks, is the cost of cars and the availability of cars. So this warrant article could pass. The dealership that has won the state bid, who we just dealt with, hasn't even gotten an allocation yet for 2024. And so they're somewhat tied. And we don't know when that would become necessary, or, will that state bid at that point change when cars become available? We are fortunate to get a 2023 car that they had held over originally for some other town, and we actually closed on that yesterday, and it was delivered, and we got it for a little over $39,000. The offset to that was the upfit, and the equipment that was required was a little bit more than we thought. So it's probably gonna come in around 67. But we were fortunate to get that car while it was available, and it was the last one that they had.
So what happens if this passes and we can't purchase a car? Does the money get returned? Does it get put into a fund? What happens?
Well, it's in a past warrant article, and it stays there. It can't be expended for anything else.
It
Does
doesn't
it
lapse.
Yes, it would lapse.
Oh, it would lapse.
So the money would be
After a year?
returned
Yeah, we
It would
can't
drop to
hold.
fund balance.
Yeah, we can't
to
hold.
fund
Return to fund
balance.
balance, not to the taxpayer.
Because it didn't get spent, it was raised and appropriated.
They would have to
And
vote.
didn't
Right, so but I'm saying it's not dedicated for this purchase. If you don't buy the cruiser, it doesn't get returned. It gets rolled into the general fund.
No, not
It
into
doesn't
the
get rolled
general
into the
fund.
general fund, we cannot spend it.
Right, into the unassigned,
Yeah.
where
Fund balance.
the fund balance that would,
You know I wouldn't support that anyways.
No, I know, but I just wanna make sure I'm clear.
And you
It's
could
like, what
potentially use that money the following year from fund balance
To buy
to
a
pass
cruiser.
the same, warrant article.
Right.
I would think that the cost, with the cost of cars, it would be more, but, you could do that.
Just having dealt with lots of lawyers in Boston, I always say, what's the worst case scenario? It doesn't pass. Then what do we do? So it's like, what's the contingency plan? Like, be prepared.
Additional discussion on Article 10.
Well, like I said, I'd love to see this back in the operating budget, but short of finding, $34,000 to remove somewhere. And,
36,637.
well, if it's at 36, I need 34 to add to the operating budget to get me 70.
Right.
Oh, yeah, correct. Right.
So can we recommend?
Not without busting the budget.
We cannot recommend this one as it currently stands.
You can.
Unless you have to pull 34,000 somewhere else out of the budget.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
before
what I
we
just said.
We keep saying we can't recommend. I think you can recommend anything you want.
can, but before we deliver the
Just to be
budget.
clear,
it-
4 of us
yeah,
can
I
recommend.
understand.
Four of us can.
4 of us can. Yeah.
Let's draw straws.
Any additional discussion? Okay. Call for a vote. Mr. Hayes.
I'll supply a no.
Mr. Cutter. Mr. Cutter.
No.
Mr. Leary.
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
I'm a yes.
I am a no. Ms. Stevens.
Regretfully, no.
Mr. Taylor.
No.
Mr. Barca.
No.
And Mr. Burke.
Yes.
Not recommended by the Budget Committee by a vote of 3-6-0.
If this does not pass, and since we just bought a cruiser, 2023, is this going to create a hardship if it does not pass, if the voters don't pass? They don't vote for it.
So I certainly think with the age of the fleet, we're heading into an area that, we did some big repairs, in December, and if you look at that maintenance and repair line, that's where you're gonna see the increase, right? So, I will work with the police, the new police chief, to figure out how we can get this back into the budget, if at all possible, for 2025. So we can figure out how to get properly back on a replacement
I hear there's a
schedule.
tower getting paid off soon. Maybe some money could come up.
All right. Just a reminder, 36,637 under the tax cap. We have one more warrant article that we can vote on this evening. Before we do so, any other motions before Article 11?
I have a couple of motions.
Yes, sir.
A reduction, bottom line reduction of 4312.10 road maintenance.
Sorry, let me find you. 4312.10 road maintenance. Bottom line reduction.
Of $8,000.
Okay. I have a motion by Mr. Taylor, bottom line reduction, 4310 road maintenance of $8,000. Do I have a second?
Sure.
Second by Ms. Douglas. Discussion?
Where you going?
My thought process is
I know where
that,
he's
you know
going.
what, we take a look at the overtime. Sure, the 3-year average falls at 17, but is it better off getting another person? And then, but again, some reason in this town I say, if we give you another person, does overtime go down? And then I get the next budget and the overtime's the same or higher. So I'm gonna take a leap of faith here and say, you know what, if, doesn't necessarily need to be all in overtime, spread it out amongst there. If you really feel that that position is needed, we're 12,334 short. I'll have one other motion to make a reduction bottom line on police for the remaining balance. That gets you the police contract, it gets you the highway worker, you gotta take a little bit of a haircut for us to be able to recommend it.
Your logic on the where this comes from to support the additional person coming in makes sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. Makes sense.
Any additional discussion on this motion?
I don't like the idea of the gamble, if it weren't to pass, but since it's a bottom line budget, I could support it.
I mean, didn't we have a worker on a warrant article recently, and that one too did not pass? So we could be removing money from a budget and not having anyone to backfill it.
Was it one? I think it failed the first year and then passed the second year.
The
There was
full-time one
a
did,
discussion
yeah.
of 2 workers at once.
No.
No?
No, one year
this
was a
failed last
part-timer,
year,
which
didn't it?
passed,
I
and
think
the
it
other one was a
failed the first
full-timer,
and
it
it
failed,
passed.
then passed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any additional discussion on the motion to reduce 4312.10 by $8,000 bottom line?
So, under this logic, which I appreciate as well, right? If ultimately Article 11 fails, will we have enough staff to actually sit in these new trucks that we're purchasing?
I mean, yeah, you're saying irregardless of the overtime being cut, just looking at the article itself.
Correct.
Well, the replacement trucks.
Right, I mean, we're getting all these new trucks, right? Are we gonna have individuals to actually drive them?
I think it costs more to hire drivers than it would be, I think, than to hire an employee to run the truck.
We contracted.
Yes, contracts are
And that's the argument we heard for snow plowing, but
$90 an hour.
Yeah. I don't think we're paying this guy $90 an hour.
No,
Any additional discussion on the motion at
that's
hand?
not full-time either.
I mean, you're right, Andrew. I mean, look, my logic can fall apart if
That's like,
the truck passes,
yeah,
the worker doesn't,
right.
and all of you pass my cut. Like, sure,
Yeah.
that can
Well,
happen.
that's where it's,
That
since it's.
might
But
just have to be a
it's
risk
a
that
bottom
we have
line
to
budget. They could move that
move it
back
back.
if they so needed to.
Just calling back to the season, I don't recall this being something that the road maintenance agent brought forward. So is it even something he desperately feels we need?
The
Yeah.
the worker
The
itself?
worker?
yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Fully supported.
So we went through all the detail of how it would reduce some of
The
the other-
library, the cemeteries,
Well,
yeah.
I know we went through them. I was saying, did the road agent come in and say, I absolutely.
He did during his tour.
Yeah. So, actually, that brings up a good point. So, if this worker passes, if the library has a bottom line budget, couldn't they fund the increase in hours by taking the money that they were using for?
No, because it was not passed by the voters, so it's a hard no.
Not to fund the position, you're saying to fund the overtime hours? Or you're saying to
So-
fund?
No, I'm saying, what I'm saying is that the worker, part of the worker is to offset landscaping, groundskeeping at the library.
Correct.
So therefore, the library budget comes down, and if the library budget is by itself and not part of the town budget, then why couldn't they reallocate that maintenance groundskeeping money to
Well,
be
the
able to?
Next year they could, but no means no.
Okay.
for this year.
It's a very small amount too, it's $1,700. Yeah.
So,
At least then
So-
maybe you get,
Yeah, if the warrant article doesn't pass, the money for the cemeteries remains in the cemeteries, and the money for the ground maintenance and library remains in the library. It doesn't impact that money,
If the article fails.
if the article fails.
okay.
I just wanted
but
to
it
check.
does impact their ability to add hours to that position, because the voters denied the
Right.
request.
Which position?
The position that they're asking to raise hours. They can't say, well, I just saved 14,000 in
Not if
grounds
their
fees.
warrant article fails.
Exactly, that's what the risk is here, of it not being in the budget.
Additional discussion on the motion to reduce 4312.10 by $8,000. Okay. Roll call vote. Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
No,
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
and Mr. Burke.
Yes.
Motion carries 8-1-0. That currently has us lost my $44,637 under the tax cap. Any additional motions before we review Article 11?
Another motion to reduce, bottom line of 4210.10 police by $4,335.
We have a motion by Mr. Taylor to reduce 4210.10 police by $4,335. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Barca. Discussion. Was there a specific place you were looking to pull that from, Mr. Taylor?
Not necessarily, but, you know, if I take a look at, you know, we've got a new chief coming in, perhaps a seminar or convention could be reduced. And honestly, I don't see something that jumps out here that can offset a contract like
Maybe we
like
can
I can
shave
with a
$5,000
person.
out of the overtime budget.
Right, but I can't really make an argument that the overtime budget can get knocked out because I'm not hiring a person.
Even the carpet.
Right.
I'm just approving a contract, so
That would be
unfortunately, it would have to be a leap of faith that it can be spread out across multiple line items.
How much did you say your
$4,335.
Would you consider amending it so that, because there was, where was it, fire hydrants, where we added 2,800? We removed that 2,800 from the fire hydrants.
Why? Do we know that the rate's going
because-
down for sure?
Because
Thought we already
Mrs.
reduced
Kleiner,
it.
no, Mrs. Kleiner recommended we
out
did
of
not
stand.
increase it, and we ended up increasing it.
Okay, good point, so I'm sorry.
So I have to,
Okay,
I have to
what was
find the
that
line,
amount?
I'm sorry.
28.
$2,820, and that was from 4220.90 fire hydrants.
What was the amount again? I'm sorry.
$2,820.
$2,820. So Mr. Taylor can amend his motion. This is a lot of math here.
15,
All right,
15.
so,
Yeah,
so I
15.
would like to amend my motion that 4210.10 police is reduced by $1,515.
The amended motion by Mr. Taylor. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Ms. Stevens.
Wasn't that added because there was another, I thought we increased the account versus,
I'm sorry?
1,000.
1,515.
15.
but
What was your question?
didn't we add to the hydrants because we added hydrants that were gonna get hit
So
on the
we
bill?
added because we wanted to be conservative because that particular development, best case, is going to open up in the fall, correct? That's with no delays whatsoever.
I thought this also addressed the ones where they're putting some like on Pinecrest or
But
something.
we were also looking at, there was a rate increase that was worked into that calculation.
Which is now frozen.
Rates are frozen.
Okay.
Now, you know, could the Department of Energy work it out with Penachuk and that order be lifted?
But it gives you a couple of pounds
then-
on it.
But it gives us a quarter or so.
So if the rates have been frozen, are you saying we could have flatlined 2023? Level funded?
Yes. but
Because
you
in which
always-
case we've got 21,000. As
But you
opposed-
always take the chances of that order that stay getting lifted. So, you
I feel
know,
comfortable with
the
the 20%.
original figure by Don Ware at Penachuk was that they were going up. Based on that rate case, I would be hesitant
Yep.
to,
Oh yeah, no, they
Alright,
always
so-
seem to win their rate case. It costs me the cost of the rate case and the increase. It's just a wonderful racket.
So before we get too sidetracked, can I call the vote on the police piece and then we can do the hydrant one?
No, I just, because the comment was that they were freezing it, so if they're freezing it, then it's a
Sure,
different
but
number.
I'm going to make another motion for the hydrants and then we can discuss hydrants.
So-
My favorite topic.
Motion to amend, 40, I gotta go back, 4210.10 to $1,515. Roll call vote to amend.
Alright.
Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
No.
Miss Douglas.
Yes.
I am a yes. Miss Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barca.
Yes.
And Mr. Burke.
Yes.
Motion carries 810. So now we'll vote on the actual amendment, which is to reduce 4210.10 police by $1,515. No additional discussion. Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
No.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
and Mr. Burke.
Yes.
All right, so that motion carries 810 and reduces 4210 by 1515.
All right, and then I need help with my last motion. What was the amount of the hydrants again? 28?
28.
2820. I'd like to make a motion to reduce line 4220.90 hydrants by $2,820.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Taylor, second by Mr. Burke. Additional discussion on this.
No, it seems like we covered a lot of it, that we're not quite sure where the rates are gonna be, but we know it's not gonna increase as much as worst case.
I feel
So how about this, Carrie? How about we wait till deliberative, more time has passed, and then if you feel that then the rates are gonna stay the same, you could always make a motion to make the whatever.
to take it down
I'm pretty
20,000.
sure that whatever they asked for, they're gonna get, because it seems like they get what they asked for, and I have to pay for the rate case, so I'm pretty sure that wherever it is, it's gonna be. So, I seem to recall a conversation that we were actually adding hydrants, that's why we added the money, so the taking it away seemed kind of odd, but.
Mr. Taylor, assuming this passes, what does that do to the tax cap at the end?
$1.
Well, hopefully, yes, I'm going under the assumption that we will be, if Article 11 gets recommended, we would be $1 under the tax cap.
That is correct. Any additional discussion on the motion 422090 hydrants reduction? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
and Mr. Burke. Yes. That passes 900. So,
So now we have to re-vote the bottom line of the budget too.
you are correct. Thank you, ma'am. We'll do that after we do Article 11.
Perfect.
So, Article 11. So we are currently $48,972 under the tax cap. Article 11. Addition of full-time highway worker. To see if the town will vote to hire a full-time highway employee effective 1 April 2024 at an estimated annual salary and related cost of $81,294.51, and further to vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $48,971 for wages and benefits for the period of April 1, 2024 to December 31, 2024. Estimated 2024 tax rate impact is 4 cents. There's a table below that shows the breakdown of wages and benefits for both 2024 as well as 2025. It also references where in 2024 some of those costs would be offset, as we were discussing earlier, by library maintenance, cemetery, and seasonal that are found in the operating budget. This was, I believe shouldn't that first line say recommended by cemetery trustees? It says library
Oh,
trustees.
yes.
Well, did the
Well,
library?
no, the second line is cemetery.
Oh, the second one's cemetery. Okay, so library has not
hasn't
voted. Okay.
yet,
Well,
but they,
before we go back to then how can we do this without their express, consent, since they operate outside of the Board of Selectmen's budget? Unless we have an agreement, that they're okay with us taking the 1758 to put towards this
They've
allocation.
had conversations, right? Yes.
may.
Is it formal in any
Months
way?
worth. So the next meeting of the library trustees, the director is bringing it up, but she has had discussion with them.
I would just hate to have
We
us
needed
end up
that to even
1758.
propose it.
Yeah, okay.
So this is to be voted on by the cemetery trustees. I'm sorry, to be voted on by the library trustees, recommended by the cemetery trustees 300, recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400. Do I have a motion on Article 11?
Motion to recommend.
Motion by Mr. Taylor,
Second.
second by Mr. Burke. Any additional, or I should say, any discussion on Article 11?
My vote will be pending I will vote in favor, but I want confirmation by deliberative that we're formally okay. Because again, the Board of Selectmen does not have the ability to reduce their budget.
And we
It's
can certainly come back and revisit this if the library does not support it.
Exactly.
I know it was a lot of math there to get us here, but I'll go back to my comment about the police contract. I appreciate Mr. Taylor's creativity, especially with the $8,000 from the overtime there at the highway, because I think that took care of a big chunk of that, and that hopefully a lot of that is offset through this additional hire and passing of this person. So I support this. Any additional discussion?
And just that I hate that we're up against the tax cap, but each department is in such desperate need for more people, both on town and school side, that I feel like we have to support this.
All right, call for a vote. Article 11. There we go. Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
and Mr. Burke.
Yes.
Motion recommend by the Budget Committee 9-0-0. And before we leave, to Ms. Douglas's point, we do need to go back and revote Article 3 operating budget. I'm really hoping that Ms. White has that number updated for me. so
Well,
that
the
I
board will need to revote that as well.
The Board of
We
Selectmen?
will.
Correct.
Yeah.
Ms. White, is that on the summary tab? Yes, I see it. Okay. Got it. So, I will reread Article 3 operating budget quickly for us to revote. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth in the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by the vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein totaling $7,883,051. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $7,874,828, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of the town of Litchfield or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 4013, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. I'm assuming the tax rate impact is not going to change based on that amount. Estimated 2024 tax rate impact is 13 cents. I have a motion to recommend.
Motion to recommend.
Motion by Mr. Taylor, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Burke. Any discussion?
Oh, it does, 11 cents.
Oh, it does. It changes the
Yeah,
estimated.
Which is. So. Look up some,
You confirming that? That is correct.
confirming that, I mean, that's what the. So
Okay.
the 2024 increase is 134,577. It is coming out to 11 cents.
So just barely got the 12.
Yeah. Okay. So estimated 2024 tax rate impact, 11 cents. Got a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Seeing none. Quick roll call. Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Mr. Cutter.
Yes.
Mr. Leary.
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Mr. Barca.
Yes.
And Mr. Burke.
Yes.
Recommended by the Budget Committee, 9-0-0. All right. I think that has taken us through the town articles for this evening. The last two articles that are on there do not have Budget Committee recommendations, which are the Litchfield Community Power and the easement. All right. So with that, thank you, Ms. Kleiner. Thank you, Ms. White. We will transition to review of the school district warrant articles. Just to recap for those that were not watching earlier, tonight we're not going to vote on the school warrant articles. Our bylaws require a formal presentation at our meeting, and so tonight will be that formal presentation. Many members have had an opportunity to participate in a joint session, to watch virtually, to ask questions. But tonight's warrant article presentation does have some additional numbers that were not there before the holiday break, as well as the tax rate impacts have been included. Thank you all. And so what we'll do is we'll go through each of the articles, motions, opportunities for questions, from Dr. Jetty or Mr. Totten, and discussions, and then we will vote on these after our budget hearing on January 11th. So with that, thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for being patient and joining us this evening.
Just a quick comment, if I
Yep,
may.
go ahead.
You'll make note that the school board did vote on the vast majority of these articles, and the warrants have been updated to reflect that vote, with the exception of 2 articles, and that is Article 1, which we're waiting for some additional information before we can vote, as well as Article 7, we did not vote because there was a clarifying statement, I believe we were running through legal before we could vote on that.
Thank you. All right, so I will read these articles in full, and then what we'll do, just follow our process. I'll read the articles. Mr. Todd and Dr. Jetty, if you have additional context you want to add for any of these, or Mr. Cutter, please feel free to do so, and then we'll open it up for additional questions. Article 1, shall the Litchfield School District vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $44,290,000 to fund the design, construction, and original equipping of a new Litchfield Elementary School on the site of the current Griffin Memorial School, and to authorize the school board to accept on behalf of the district state building aid in the amount of $5,672,130, with the balance of $38,617,870 to be raised by the issuance of bonds or notes in compliance with the Municipal Finance Act, RSA 30-33-1. I don't even know how to pronounce that. As amended, with such bonds or notes to be issued in phases over multiple years, in amounts to be determined by the school board, which amounts shall not in the aggregate exceed $38,617,870, and to authorize the school board to issue, negotiate, sell, and deliver said bonds and notes, and to determine the rate of interest thereon and the maturity of other terms thereof, and to authorize the school board to apply for, obtain, accept, and expend federal and additional state or other aid, if any, which may be available for said project, and to authorize the school board to take any other action or to pass any other vote relative thereto, and finally, to raise and appropriate the additional sum of blank for the first year's payment of the bond. 3/5 vote required to approve this article. The estimated tax rate impact has not been determined yet. And as Mr. Cutter mentioned, this has not been voted on by the school board yet.
One of the discussions at last night's board meeting on this particular article was obviously the state aid part of this, which is listed as $5,672,000, right?
Is that a firm number?
It's not a firm number. We actually are anticipating it being higher than that. I believe the number was around 7.1.
$7,019,000.
Why do we include this number?
We included this number because it is 80%.
We get 80%
80%.
of the maximum amount that we qualify for at a certain point, and the certain point is before construction, so it's after the architect drawings are through, after the state fire marshal signs off on it, we get the 80%. And then the 20%, the remaining 20% comes after everything is complete, after we give all the expenses to the state. Then they look at the expenses, because they're gonna allow some and not allow others, which we're aware of. And then they decide, okay, how much should your state aid have been? So they're
because of
telling
the
us that the state aid should, is gonna be in a range of like 5.8 million to that 7 million. But we felt we wanted to go with that conservative number of what we're pretty much guaranteed if we were able to get state aid this time.
And that if is an if, right? I want to highlight that, and it's an if. And the board also had a discussion, partly why we didn't vote on this is that the board felt it was important to add the direct word of contingency into this article. And so we were investigating that with our legal team.
So contingent upon the receipt of
Correct.
$5,670,000
Of state aid.
Yeah, as was discussed at that meeting, because I actually did watch some of it. What qualifies as state aid? $1? Because in which case, or is it the 30%, or is it the 5.6 that we've already put in here?
We hear you. We're investigating that.
And I would say, so to circle back on the $5,567,2 piece, the way it's structured that way is because the 20% would come at the conclusion of the project. Thus, you have to bond the full amount of the 44,290 in order to have the money to pay your bills, because you're not going to get that last $1.4 million until the project is complete. Is that, am I stating that correctly?
I believe you said we'd have to bond the whole 44 million.
I'm sorry, the 38 million. Yeah. 38.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Bond or a note at the end.
Correct. Otherwise, if you were getting the full 7, your bond amount would actually be $1 million less based on that
So-
state aid, right?
What then happens to the remaining 1 point some million if we receive it after the fact, if it's not tied to this project? Does it automatically get applied towards the bond payment?
So that's one of the reasons why we decided to work in multiple bonds and a note, partly for many reasons. One is that when you're told a new construction, where you have to do the architectural plans first, which takes months, then you have to break ground, then you have to build, then you have to put all the furnishings in. We're not talking about an 8-month project, we're talking about a project that's gonna last many months into different years. So, and we've heard from the townspeople that, does a 30-year bond make sense? Does kind of grabbing a bond right now with interest rates being higher make sense? So if we do multiple bonds, we're able to do multiple things, which will meet kind of that responsibility which the community, the tax dollars of the community. So our first bond could be for a smaller amount for pre-construction bond. So we would get that bond maybe when the interest rates are hopefully coming down a little bit, but maybe not where they're gonna be at their lowest. Then we would, before construction began, we would get that 5.6 million from the state, as well as we would do a much larger bond that we probably would put out for about a 30-year bond at that point, where the earlier pre-construction bond, we could work around with lower years. Then, as we go to equip the building, we could again do a much smaller bond for a shorter period of time, because if you're equipping the building, the desks aren't always gonna last that 30 years. So we could do a shorter bond, hopefully at a much lower interest rate. And then finally, at the end, we could do a note in anticipation of the amount that we think we're gonna qualify. But I think it would be important for the note and the last bond for the equipment to be a bond which doesn't have prepayment penalties. So any money that we got from the state, we could put towards that right away.
That's why that would be a note instead of a bond.
Yes.
So how do you estimate the tax impact?
It's going to be
So-
based on what that first. Yeah, that's a good question.
We're gonna do what the town does and just say 0.
For the first year.
However, they do provide a
table.
chart for subsequent years, so that'd be a plus.
I appreciate I think it's creative to look at this over multiple bonds, and in hopes that your second and third bond would have lower interest rates and potentially shorter terms. I think it gives you the flexibility to have those options versus tying your hands to one 30-year bond where you're locked into those interest rates for a longer period of time.
So I have a question on the rationale of a 30-year versus the other ones, because when you do the math, I think you said an additional $16 million.
Well, here's the deal, the board has not seen any numbers behind these, we have not made any
so-
decisions on length of term, 30, 20, like, that needs to
So
be
we
determined.
are up against the clock. We have a lot of missing information. Is it wise to move forward with this in this fiscal year?
We have a bond hearing
I-
before the budget hearing.
We don't know our term, we don't know our rates, we don't know our plan, we don't know our cost. We have a lot of we don't knows. How well did that work last time?
Sounds like you'll hear it at the bond meeting.
I'm just saying
But if I
that,
may, at the bond hearing, it may be this sort of information, because part of what this does is it authorizes the board, it puts maximums, right? You've got the 44 is the total project cost can't exceed. You've got the 38 total bonding amount or noting amount that can't exceed. And this is allowing the board the flexibility to work within terms that make sense, rates that make sense. All of this looking into the future, I mean, this could unfold over a year plus, 2 years plus, in terms of when you take these notes and how you do it. And you have to believe that the school board is gonna be watching this very carefully and making sure that they're getting the maximum benefit for the taxpayers. So it's structured in that way. We had the conversation with Gordon, and I said, the budget committee is not gonna be happy because it doesn't have the word contingent in it. The school board wasn't happy that it didn't have the word contingent in it. But he, as the attorney who was advising us, said, this is the language that keeps you out of the other trouble. The other trouble is that if you put the maximum amount in and you don't get it, you have a gap, you have a deficit then. And so he said, this is the way to structure it so that you can maximize the building aid. There was a town up north that had a benefactor who came along and just plunked down a gift of money on the town. And when that occurred, that actually came off the town, that came off the building aid side of it. And they had to go back to the legislature and say, that shouldn't come off the building aid side of it, it should come off the local portion. And they got that law changed, right? So maybe somebody will come along with some money that we're not even aware of, because that's happened in other communities. And you don't want that to happen and create a bind for getting this project done and getting the school built.
I fail to see how having a firm number and then somebody coming along with extra gifting would somehow cause us to be too low on our initial number. But there's a lot of unknowns. But again, the rationale, we mentioned a 30-year. Why a 30-year?
I'm completely open to a 20-year if the financials make sense. We haven't seen that, so.
Because looking at the initial, the question was, what is the additional interest? I believe I heard 16 million?
Did
Is
you
that- was that
mention-
what
I think it was 12.
12 million?
Yeah.
Interest is not included in any of these numbers, correct?
Well, it is built into the 360, or however many payments you make over 20 years.
No, I'm
30
saying
years.
in the warrant article,
In that number. no.
interest is not included.
That is
That is
correct.
correct.
Okay, so here's my issue with that. And it goes back to the LMS project. We were sold a lot about a lot of the rebates and those types of numbers, including the state aid, which I appreciate the fact that you're using the low number. Then be fair and give the low state aid number and give me in these numbers a low interest rate number. But you can't have one piece of the equation and not tell the taxpayers the other equation,
No, I
because
don't
it's
think we're-
not gonna be zero interest.
Well, we're not saying that we're not gonna tell. What we're saying is that the warrant article doesn't have to contain all of that facts.
Would it be-
There will be backup material that
No.
will
Voter guide.
supply voter guides, there will be handouts, materials.
So you're telling me.
Also,
When you're
Hold on,
structuring
hold
a
on.
legal warrant article, you have to have certain language and certain constraints.
So,
I would
no
love to have,
chart?
I would love to have two things. I would love to have interest added to this as well, when the board discussed this, right? Our hands are tied based upon what the bond council is saying that we can put forward as a warrant article, as well as what our lawyers are saying we can put forward as a warrant article.
And what DRA says.
And what
In-
DRA says.
in
We
the
are
actual
not
paragraph
In the actual
itself.
paragraph of the article, we can supply whatever we want in voter guides, information, we intend to do that. We're limited as to what I can actually put in the article
So
itself.
you
So I'm
cannot.
So-
put
Hold on.
in
Hold on.
I cannot put a table either,
So
I would love to put a
how come
table.
the town can put them on a,
because this is a bond.
well, was not did we not bond the?
Did somebody pull the fire
We
station?
we actually look. I remember that was looked
We
at
did
the
not
school board
bond.
meeting, and the table was not on. I'm fairly certain Miss Ames looked, and the bond vote for the fire station, I don't believe included.
Did not have a table.
Did not have a table on it.
Really?
Yeah.
So,
Fine.
Let me hold on. I want to hold.
Remember a table in the
Payment was the
handouts.
same.
I'm sure there was.
It
a
wasn't the
table,
handouts, but not on the actual warrant
Not
article.
in the warrant.
I want to hold on. There were lots of thoughts here. You had two thoughts. Finish your second thought, and then to
The,
Ms.
the
Douglas.
table was
and
the
then-
second thought, right? Because I understood and fully appreciate that was gonna be a comment tonight, and it's something that I've asked for and would love to see here too. Can't include it.
DRA is gonna say, I'm sorry, you cannot give more information for clarity to the voter. You can't give them an amortization chart.
Again, in the voter materials we can, not in the actual warrant.
Did you have a follow up?
No, I'm just saying, I find it incredibly interesting that we cannot provide additional information after, because I've seen additional information in some of these things, to provide additional clarity to the voters, which is gonna make, well, you know, hey,
I think the difference is
It's
what we're hearing
3/5
is
vote,
the
so good
bond,
luck.
The bond itself, Mr. Burke.
Thanks, we're excited about it.
No, my question was gonna ask about the fire department, because I don't recall there being a chart.
This
on
was
the warrant.
it was discussed at the 21st at the fire station, and Miss Ames found it, pulled it up, and said in the actual warrant article itself there was not a table.
so,
Because every
Do you-
year's payment was the same. It's the
But
same
it
every year, 266,000.
Right, well,
It didn't need a chart.
Did it
It
have
wasn't a
interest in it?
fluctuating. It was including interest.
Okay.
That was the payment.
that was when they figured out the annual payment,
Yep.
that was the payment that was included for
Yep.
the
Yep.
cost, the annual payment.
And we're at a different point because interest rates are higher. So if we wanted an annual payment, we would have to say, okay, let's grab the current interest rate, which wouldn't be the responsible thing to do for either 20 or 25 or 30 years. By breaking it up into multiple bonds, one of the construction's not expected to start until March of 2025.
So if we were,
So why would we take out a bond in July?
Pay all the
when we can
interest.
take out and just keep paying interest and keep having that
So,
accrue,
question.
when we could take it out later?
So, are you obligated to only obtain the bond for which is here? So where I'm going with this is, if we know that the current interest rate is high, and say we look at a 20-year bond, we know that's gonna be a significant annual payment. But that could potentially be the worst case payment. So if we tell the voters it's gonna be whatever that value is, could we not then go and say, hey, voter, we found you a deal by breaking this up? Or are we obligated to buy the one deal, one bond for the one price that's included in the article?
No, I think that's what they're saying, is that they
we
would
gotta
have
break it up.
multiple bonds.
We can
No,
break,
no, no, I'm saying, not saying don't do that. But I'm saying that the voters have a right to know what the annual cost is going to be, and we know a worst case cost. We
And-
know that worst case cost is whatever this is over the deal at current rates.
Gotcha.
So by, that way you could have an annual cost, and through the magic of money markets, or however you do it, you might be able to get a lower annual cost, but you've already told the voters, hey, it's gonna cost 1.5 million a year, we got an awesome deal, it's gonna cost you one.
Is
Is
that-
anybody gonna complain that we
is
just
that-
saved?
Is that information gonna come out at the bond hearing, I assume? Is that where that's gonna be captured?
We'll have a deeper discussion there.
Because if you cannot provide an annual cost, I would not want to be in your position trying to sell this to the voters when you say, we're not sure what it's going to cost in year 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 15.
Well, I think it'd be hard for the budget committee to support
Oh.
that even without that there.
Absolutely not. It would be irresponsible to vote in favor of that without being able to tell the voters.
Doug,
how
did
much
you
it's gonna
mention
cost.
last night that total cost might be $70 million with interest?
I didn't mention that last night. I know other people have brought up
You
that
mentioned
number.
63, I think, at the CIP.
62.
People mentioned, yeah, 63, 62. And that again, I've also mentioned, and the reason I mentioned the 63 and 62, which no one believes in town that we're gonna be able to bond 38 million and not pay back any interest. So the only thing that is known is the cap that we can bond. We're not gonna know the interest, whether we break up the bond, whether we, do a full bond at the beginning, because if we do a full bond at the beginning and rates get better and we can refinance in 10 years, we would do that. So there's always an unknown in the total interest rates. What is not unknown is, in this warrant article, is the maximum amount that we can bond. Could it end up ending up at 63 million? Yes. Could it end up being lower than that? Yes. Would it be better in some ways if we could know what the total amount would be? Yes, but I think when interest rates are going down, we gotta be, the responsible thing to do is to be able to get those interest rates that are lower when we can.
So then why not wait for the entire project until rates are lower?
Right.
Because I don't think the first bond would have to be,
March of 25.
well, the first bond for pre-construction, which is architecture and other work. We're not quite sure exactly on that number, but we're not talking about probably a bond that's over $3 million. I'm not saying that's small money, but when we're talking about the overall bond, it's starting off at a lot smaller.
Based upon last night's discussion, are you seriously considering the possibility of rehabbing GMS?
The board has tasked us with engaging with conversation with our architect, which I did today. Principal Mitchell and I sat down and spent about 3 hours over sketches and matching it up against the space needs, the programmatic needs, making sure that we were able to address everything. We sent some stuff this evening off to the architect for further discussion, and there'll be a presentation or discussion at the facilities management meeting next Wednesday. That'll be broadcast live here in the room, so you can watch that show or join us, and then we'll know more. So right now, it's in the hands of our professional architect to do the rest of the work.
And the goal of that is to be able to clearly articulate the best known amount to renovate versus new. Is that a true statement?
That is the goal.
That's the goal.
Is to achieve the programmatic needs that we met by renovating and tearing down and building new on the existing site and incorporating the 1930s building into the project. So it's taking the current footprint and working within that area, but it's literally touching every square foot of that building, because there are things that need to be addressed in there relative to HVAC, lighting, electrical, there are all sorts of things that need to be addressed, so yes, that's what we're costing.
But I think for your question is, are we considering that? Yes, because I think at the very basic, the main thing that we know is that something needs to be done.
Right.
Something needs to be done for where the kids are currently learning and the teachers are currently teaching. And for our job is to get the information, and then it's town people to vote on it type of thing. So our job is to get the information that people need in order to make informed decisions.
And
I
Did
watched
Kyle,
that.
did
Go
Kyle
ahead,
have
Mr.
some
Tracy.
initial feedback based upon the meeting?
Well, he didn't watch the meeting or participate in the meeting, so.
Okay, so
He was reacting to the information I was sharing with him, and then I forwarded the information along to him.
What was your question, Mr. Hayes? Sorry, I didn't hear.
No, I just wanted to know if Kyle Barker had some initial, responses,
gotcha.
based upon the additional work you're
I will
asking
say
him to do.
that Kyle said, this exercise he did about 2 years ago, so there is a document. He said, he just has to refresh it, he has to update the numbers in
Costs
there.
are different.
He has to deal with, he's talking about a 45% cost increase over the period of time because of what happened during the pandemic. So he said, I've gotta go through, I've gotta see how much per square foot I was using then, what are the right numbers to use now. So he's gonna refresh and bring that document up to speed. And then he's gonna take a look at the work that we did today and work on our numbers also, so.
Can I
Stevens.
just ask a question about, you talked about possibly incorporating the 30s building. Wouldn't that violate the building aid requirements?
In which way?
Because you're bringing the
Proximity
school
to
closer
3A.
to 3A.
So one of the things that has been said to us by some members of the community is forget about the state aid. If we can take $44 million, which is the cost of the new school, deduct out the $7 million if you get the maximum and you're at $37 million, and you can renovate and achieve all the goals for less than that, that might be a win. And so that's part of what we're taking a look at. And so,
Okay.
And to clarify, sorry, go ahead, finish.
and I think the other piece is that, we've been told by several people that, there's no problem that can't be resolved. So, if we have to have the state put up guardrails along 3A, if we have to put fencing along 3A to make sure that the schoolyard is contained, if we have to change how you get into the property and loop through the property so that you're not stacking up out on 3A, there are things that can be done to mitigate that. But frankly, if you're not using the state aid, you're doing that because it's the right thing to do for safety, not because you have to do it to get the money.
One of the things, can I just add one comment to that? Because one of the things, it pairs to this, that I heard you say last night that I think is really important to this, because someone asked this question during the school board meeting. There's all of these components that contributed to that $7 million that qualified the school district for that state aid. If we don't meet all of those requirements, one thing is not met, proximity to 3A, for example. It's not as if we get 80 or 90% of the money, we get zero of the
Right.
money. We have to meet all of those 100% in order to get the amount. We can't meet 95% and get 95% of the money.
Correct.
It's an all or nothing thing,
That is
which
correct.
I think is a really important
Yep.
piece of that.
So we have to correct all the deficiencies that were noted by us, noted by the state, as they walk through in order to get the state aid, all or nothing. And the reason for that is that we were ranked in a competitive process against other schools due to our deficiencies and their deficiencies. So if we don't rectify all our deficiencies, then the ranking wasn't true for the other schools. The other schools could have said that were below us. Well, they didn't fix that. They shouldn't have got points, kind of added or taken off, however you want to put it, in order to kind of rank it at where we did. So those deficiencies went into our rankings, which went into, we were ranked 5th, which is putting us in position to most likely get building aid. But if we don't correct it, then the ranking wasn't true.
So I get
Yep,
two
go ahead.
questions. One is a quick one. As far as Article 1, does the DRA specifically say that you cannot put in there, not including interest?
I'll ask that question.
Okay. Because I would rather see it in the warrant. Sure, you can
those-
put it in a voter guide all
those
you
words,
want. I
not-
want to see it where people actually make a decision,
But those words, not including interest.
not including
So
interest.
44 million, not including interest. I'll ask that question.
Thank you. Question number 2, when you were here last year for the warrant article about the land, And also, when we've talked about renovations, the constant theme is that land is not good because it's basically, for all intents and purposes, practically wetlands. Now, all of a sudden, the land over there falls through. Now, all of a sudden, this is good. Are we rushing into a new GMS on a bad plot of land because we're hell-bent on trying to get this done because it's needed, when really we should be taking a step back and saying, should we be building it on land that is higher quality?
The board has addressed this many times over the past several meetings. And the land at the ball field next to the GMS property where the new site is being proposed was in the initial scope of what was reviewed. Right, we can all agree to that, correct? Right, this was a part of the initial proposals and one of the options that was laid out. It wasn't the best option, right? It was an option.
Because it had additional costs to mitigate.
It had additional costs to mitigate. Obviously, we know that there's water issues at GMS currently today, right? We know all this. There were site walks performed of that land, right? Once the Albuquerque land fell through, we went back to the table and said, all right, well, where's another suitable parcel of land, right? And we went back to our proposals, and this was a viable option, right? And it was a viable option. Would it cost more for the water mitigation efforts and kind of the site work? Yes. Is it the best option? No. The best option would be certainly to the proximity to the police and fire stations and right where it was. That's no longer on the table.
Right.
But this is still a viable option, always has been a viable option. It just wasn't the best option at the time.
And I think Dr. Jetty can speak too, because during the last several years, it wasn't just the land on Albuquerque that was looked at. There was multiple other sites within Litchfield, some of them which probably could have been better than GMS that weren't able to be for sale, and some of them would have been maybe about the same type of thing. But there has been quite a search, and we even then searched some more after the Albuquerque land was no longer available for sale as well. So we have looked, and by we I mean more Dr. Jetty have looked at multiple pieces of land. There's only so much land in Litchfield, only so much land for sale, only so much land that could house, a school with parking and fields, so.
I guess my point is that when you had the other land, I was getting sold hard that the GMS land was bad. And we had to take this because this is much better land. My concern is that now we settle for land that I was told is not ideal. And then we go build this on there and find out that there's problems because basically it's built on swamp.
Well, I think it's true, it's not ideal. Ideal would have been directly across from the fire station.
Right. But do you spend more time looking for better quality land? And I realize it's a gamble. You may never find it.
There's no land.
But also if you drop tens of millions of dollars, so I don't get into the whole, is it X or Y or Z? Tens of millions of dollars, and then you drop it on a bad piece of land and it starts to cause problems. That's worse than...
So, Bob, you played baseball on that field. How wet is it?
Left field corner's wet.
But what I've been told about the rest of the field, Peter said it's dry as a bone. He said he's never seen standing water on that field.
Well, there's been standing water when there's a lot of rain.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the day we walked it, it was in the pouring rain after a torrential all weekender, and there was a little bit of water. The point being that if you design a new school on it, and you know this from the beginning, that people developing that project are going to be able to make sure that it's okay. That's very different than lifting up GMS and putting a vapor barrier under it. That's not something that we're going to be able to do. So, I think part of what we were talking about with that site is that this will be something in the renovation costs, right? We have to deal with the fact that there is an underground river going under that building. There is condensation on the floor because of the cooling effect from that water. It's almost like 3A acts like a dam, and the water just sort of flows along there.
It flows pretty well when that area is cleared out, just saying.
Actually, there's, the area is cleared out. We cleared it out.
Like, last time I went through, I think I saw trees growing up through there,
Yeah,
so.
go take another look, cause our crew cleared that out a couple of years, last year, I think.
I was like, you can't let it go a couple of years. That's when we had the problems.
So
You
in,
can cut trees, but the roots are still there.
go ahead.
The point with it is that that's what we were talking about with that land. So if you're starting new and you kind of have a blank slate and you're able to design and work with what you have, it'll be very different to mitigate there. So 5 options initially. New school, new site was option number 1. When we found a site, that's what we landed on. When we lost that site and when we had exhausted multiple other pieces of property, then we reverted back to, so what do we already own? And if you compare building up on the upper plateau where the middle school is to building in the back, this is actually desirable because you're not gonna have all the traffic crunch that you have, and you'll be able to do field work up above, which again is appropriate. We're like, for the middle schoolers, need to have a field in their front yard, not somewhere else in town that they've gotta go to or hike through the woods to get to, so.
Regardless of my opinion on whether or not we need a new school or should be taking other action, I have concern with the structure of this article itself. So it sounds like you guys are working on resolving that. Budget hearings when?
A week. So that's a great segue to what I was just gonna say. I certainly don't want to limit discussion on this article, given the scope and size of it. I've also heard through the course of this conversation that between school facilities that's gonna happen on Wednesday, a bond hearing that's gonna happen on Thursday in advance of our budget hearing, that the language that we're looking at right now could potentially look different at the budget hearing that we present. And so I want to be respectful of our time. I think we're going to have an opportunity to, after the budget hearing and what this looks like, to have additional discussions and hopefully to vote a recommend or not recommend on this article that evening.
Well, the budget hearing and the bond hearing are on the same night.
That is correct.
So
So-
next Thursday is gonna be a very busy night, because, and this will be at the auditorium for those that are watching, right? We're having, are we having a school board meeting that night now too?
We discussed it, but we didn't set it.
We didn't set it, okay. So there's the there's the
Bond hearing at
bond hearing,
6:30.
there's the budget hearing, and
Seven.
then a budget committee meeting as well.
Correct.
I know we talked about a school board meeting as well, but.
We talked about that, or then we said we could hold off until the
Okay.
following Wednesday. We never settled on which one we wanted to do. So
Okay.
if the board, it's a pleasure. If you want to meet, we'll get a.
Well, what I'm gonna recommend for time's sake, unless there's items we haven't discussed
Is
yet,
it-
is that we let the conversations that I think a lot of what Mr. Hayes was talking about, school facilities, that meeting's on Wednesday. I think between that and the bond hearing in advance of the budget hearing, that it's going to inform exactly what this looks like, what we're gonna be presenting on Thursday evening, and what we're gonna be voting on Thursday evening. So we'll have an opportunity for additional discussion then, unless someone has any additional points they haven't made yet.
So in what timeline would we be receiving a more, well, actually,
That was my question. Yeah, because
if I'm voting, I'm expected to vote next Thursday, and if I get this on Wednesday, I can guarantee you what my vote's gonna be.
Well, it sounds like we would get this on Thursday, right, after the bond hearing.
So we're gonna have the bond hearing and get feedback from the public. We're gonna have the budget hearing and get feedback from the public. The deadline to post the warrant is actually January 29th. That's the legal deadline to have it posted, so,
But
and
don't we have a legal vote we have a deadline to vote prior to that?
I think you have one more meeting, don't you, the following Thursday?
No,
There is
for the
an
budget
RSA
hearing.
that states that,
We do not have another meeting, scheduled meeting after the budget hearing on the 11th. Our next time together is
Deliberative?
town deliberative.
the guidance I have from our attorney doesn't have that date on it, Carrie, so if there's another date for the budget.
If there
hearing,
is,
it's not on
if you
our
can
sheet.
find that, that would be.
Let's see.
I have the deadline for the board to vote and post. Which is the 29th.
Additional discussion on Article 1 this evening.
I just had a question, and you don't have to answer it tonight. It could be the Facilities Improvement Committee. So, you're proposing a new school, but we are charged with looking at what's best for the community. So what I'd like to know is, I think I've heard that this is not just an elementary school. There's ways that the building is locked off so that it could be accessed at night for rec, maybe community meetings. I know we're constantly overscheduling this meeting room and the fire station. The library has been using some space at the church to hold larger functions. So besides just it being a new elementary school, what else is it offering the rest of the community as a space?
So I'll answer to the new construction piece, because that's easier. We factored all that in. So the way it's structured, the gym will be accessible completely from the outside with the rest of the school sealed off. So nights and weekends, rec league will be able to get in, utilize the gym space. There's a platform in there, so it's also kind of like the gym / auditorium. The music room is adjacent to that, so performances, et cetera, can all take place in that core part of the building. And then I think if people wanted access to other spaces, the way it's designed is you come in the main lobby and the media center, library is right there. So that learning commons space could be also available. And if memory serves, there are then doors that lock off the rest of the building. So
is this the new building, the new building or old building?
this is the
This
new
would just be
building.
new
I know, it
construction,
used to
like
be
the
right
Warren.
there. I keep looking.
All right, so
It's the
I did
Thursday before
find
the
it,
last
the
meeting.
timeline for SB2 annual, according to the state of New Hampshire, Thursday, January 25th is the last day for Budget Committee to deliver budget and warrant article recommendations.
So we have to have our votes in by the 20th.
By the 25th.
So 25th, and then we have to post the warrant by the 29th.
Yes, but I can already tell you that the fact that we are even contemplating a Thursday, January 25th meeting.
You
It's
could
been blood
contemplate a
boil.
meeting on January 18th.
I'm sorry?
We don't have any meetings currently scheduled. And
We have
I said
not.
contemplate.
I know, and my plan is to vote next Thursday after the budget hearing.
This will be the first time in how many years I've
Any-
been with me that we would actually have to have a meeting after the
I
budget hearing?
don't, I wouldn't recommend that. I mean, this is a lot of information to take in, the largest project the town has ever undergone. To get the information, try to swallow it, and vote the same night, I think is completely irresponsible of this committee. Our job is supposed to be to advocate for the taxpayers. And to do that in one night, we kind of saw what happened the last time this committee just blindly went along with something. Right? It's Litchfield's version of the big dig right up the road. Okay? Over time, 4 years on a 5-month project. Over budget, over everything. We did not vet that as a group. We did not do the town a favor. And I don't think we should repeat the same mistake. I think it's insanity if we do.
Any additional,
Just a correction, it's not the largest project you've seen. It'll be the most costly because of today's dollars. But the high school is twice the size of this school, and if you take the money that you spent back then.
It is the
was
largest project this town
project.
has ever undertaken. The high school is $15 million.
Yes, but it was
So we're
twice.
just arguing semantics.
hold on.
Dollar-wise, it is the biggest impact to a
I
person's
said
budget.
that,
Never
I
seen-
acknowledge that, Carrie.
We've never seen anything like this before.
But
Dollar
bring
wise.
that forward to today's dollars, and it'll be,
Yeah, but today's dollars is like, what, $1,500 on my tax bill? It's pretty sizable,
any,
just for this project.
any
Mr.
additional,
Chairman, can we move to Article 2, please?
any,
For time.
yeah, for the
We
sake
don't
of
have the
time.
information
Well,
for
no,
this.
can we table it?
Well, we're,
I'd like an understanding of what the budget committee intends to do next week and whether we can expect to vote or not.
well, I think part of that, I'll be honest with you, is if it stays as it currently is written, and the only thing that is included is the finishing of the last sentence and the tax impact, based on what happens out of the bond hearing, then I feel like we've received all the information that we need in order to vote that evening.
So there's a couple of things that we're still working on in terms of semantics of this article. We heard tonight from Mr. Taylor about not
Contingency.
including interest, right? So we're gonna look into that. The board has asked that we continue to investigate the word contingent.
I
Right.
view those as small, minor changes that
Oh.
aren't.
They're anchors.
Yeah,
They
but I'm
need to be
I'm
met.
saying in the sense of needing an additional meeting to vote.
With
That's
all
my point.
respect.
Oh, sure, because if they're not there, my vote's easy.
But I'm saying you would not.
We already know you
If
voted.
those
Doesn't
were
matter
if
they are
those
not.
were added in
Jeez.
on Thursday, that would not be a reason to delay.
There's no need to
voting.
review, Gary.
That's my point.
Brian, if I truly felt that this project was gonna save the
I
taxpayer
know that, but
money, you
you've been
haven't sold
you've been
me
a no
on
for
it.
2 years, so we
All right.
already know that you're gonna be a no.
Andrew, did that answer your question?
Not really, but we'll go with that.
And the second part of it is, if the flip is that all of a sudden this becomes a renovation, then I think that's a different warrant article and it hasn't been presented to us, and that's a different conversation.
I mean, agree, and if that's where this goes, I mean, that changes the whole spirit of this article altogether. So.
I agree.
I mean, my feeling is, I think we need another meeting.
I think
We
so,
have
too.
to.
I don't think that, voting for it right after everything is, filled in, I just don't, I think we need time.
I mean, there's a lot that can change in this. If it's a 15-year, a 20-year, a 30-year, big difference. If we don't even have the full identity of what each annual payment's going to be, because we're going to ad hoc it for the next 30 years, that's a big deal. If it's not contingent on state aid, big deal. So there's a lot of things that are still missing that we need to discuss and truly understand the impact of. This, as written, is not something that would be responsible to support to our local taxpayers. Regardless of my personal feeling on it, this has to be in the best interest of the taxpayers. It has to be structured in a way that makes sense, and it's not there yet.
Could I
I'd
put
like to
on
make a
my
motion.
Could I put on my budget committee hat for 1 minute? Right. School board aside, don't hold this against me.
I'm going to.
Well, you probably will. But I would recommend a meeting on the 25th as well.
Well, we have to. It
Don't hold that
pisses me
against
off. We have to.
Right.
Mr. Taylor?
So, to stop all the discussion, let's put it to a vote. I'd like to make a motion that we add a meeting, 7 PM, January 25th. Yeah.
Second,
A motion by Mr.
Now
Taylor.
let's vote and end the discussion.
Have a motion by Mr. Taylor. Have a second by Ms. Douglas. Any additional?
check my calendar.
I just
though,
try to
'cause,
check the calendar.
It's the fourth Thursday of the month. It's your scheduled meeting day.
It is, except,
No,
yeah.
no, we have not traditionally met after
Normally
budget
do not
hearing
meet.
until
Oh.
after the election.
But we
So it
do
is
have-
not a
Hold on,
regularly scheduled
hold on,
meeting?
hold on.
We do have the meeting room booked.
But we have not met in the 10 years I've been on
No,
this.
I'm saying the recurring thing.
Any additional discussion on the motion? Any conflicts for that?
No, I have no conflicts other than,
Can we have it earlier?
no. Do you
Thanks,
want me
Brian.
to be even more agitated?
Thanks,
No.
Brian.
Gas on the fire.
Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Leary.
Yes.
With
Douglas.
regret, yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens.
It is the
Mr.
right
Taylor.
thing.
Yes.
Mr. Barca.
Yep.
And Mr. Burke.
Yes.
There we go.
We will be meeting on,
Problem solved.
Mr. Brunel, if you're watching,
Now move on.
we will be meeting on Thursday, January 25th at 7 PM. Discuss Article 1. All right, we're
Note
gonna.
that we have to vote. We have to walk out of there with a
Well,
vote.
and so let me say this, and I want to put a bow on this and move on. After the budget hearing, we can have additional discussion on Article 1. Okay? I'm going to time box that discussion so that we can then vote on the rest of these articles that evening, and the focus of our meeting on the 25th will be discussion and voting on Article 1.
I do have a question as to why it's Article 1 and why Article 1 and 2 are in the order that they are, because traditionally Article 1.
So the
first
RSA
article is
states
done.
that when you're considering a bond, it has to be the first thing taken up, the first order of business. So Article 1 has to be the bond.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, this caused a little ripple because
Because it sets the tone for the rest of my ballot voting, I can tell you.
well, the teachers
Teacher
like having Article
contracts.
2, and they can't because it's now the budget.
Duct tape.
All right. Article 2. Discussion. Shall the Litchfield School District vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget, posted with the warrant, or as amended by the vote at the first session, for the purposes set forth herein, totaling $26,378,939. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $26,032,315, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of the Litchfield School District or by law, or the school board may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 4013, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. Operating budget estimated tax impact is a reduction of 8 cents. The default budget estimated tax impact is a reduction of 36 cents. This has recommended by the school board 500. Before we discuss I know you alluded to this earlier, so either Mr. Cutter, Mr. Todd, and Dr. Jetty, if you all want to speak to the estimated tax rate impact, please.
Well, there's a couple things with this, right? The estimated tax rate impact you'll see is negative, which logically, in my mind, didn't make a ton of sense, but it did after explanation, right? We're not, the $497,000 for the land was in last year's budget. It's
How
not in
much
this
of
year's.
this reduction is associated with that return?
So we'll get to that,
Yeah.
okay? In addition to that, it was brought to my attention today that the board will need to revote this article because there was a change in a discrepancy identified in the numbers. Mr. Totten, I'll turn it over to you to talk about food service. And I alluded to this at the beginning with food service, if we get back into it.
Yeah, so unfortunately, when I looked at the 100, which became 135,000 that we were going to transfer over to food service, it started as 100,000, and then with the adjustments by the school board to pricing, still knowing that there would be a gap, they increased it to by another 35,000 to 135,000. So when we're looking at that 135,000, what it really is it's lack of revenue. So what I had done when I was figuring out the tax rate was that instead of having the revenue, if we're talking about $741,674 for food service, instead of having the revenue equal that, it was $135,000 less, which is correct, because that would mean that we would have to raise an additional $135,000 for that. But what I had also done was that $135,000 is part of the food service budget or appropriations, but we also put it into the general fund
So it's
as
double
a transfer,
counted?
so it's double appropriated. So the general fund amount should come down by $135,000, because if not, we're double appropriating
So
it.
who
does
wants to
that-
make the motion?
Is that, so that number does not reflect the reduction of the 100, the 26,378,939 does not reflect less 135?
It does not, so it would become 26,243,939.
450's in there. The warrant.
And would that
article from
affect
last
the
year.
default?
It should be a separate number.
It would not impact the default.
Okay.
It's being ruled out, which is.
And so it would change the reduction for the tax impact to
So it
minus
was-
19
went
cents
into the
For the operating budget?
for the operating budget.
operating budget, but then that, this year it's not.
Okay. So is that,
It's a
you
separate
said the,
warrant article,
Yeah.
But because we're returning it, it's not in the total budget at all.
Mr. Cutter, you said the school
Those
board
reductions,
is
yeah,
gonna have to
right.
revote this, correct?
School board will have to revote this because it's a change to the numbers.
Okay, so do I have a motion by the budget committee?
I thought we weren't voting
No,
tonight.
we're
I
not
think we
voting.
need to
Not
wait and
voting
see
on
what their vote is.
Well, you can certainly.
Oh, we need to
vote.
fix the number.
No,
It's
to
on-
fix
it's
the,
on
yeah,
number.
sorry, I meant to
You
fix
can
the
vote-
number.
you
My
can vote
apologies.
your
I'll make a
Not,
motion to fix
by
the bottom.
135.
not on the article. I'll
Well,
re-
since we're meeting on the 25th, we can just vote then.
Or we can knock it out now. So,
So, hey, can you hang on one sec, please?
yes, sir, go ahead.
Can you explain that again when you mentioned the money for the land that went into the,
So, Mr. Totten, if you could explain why we have a negative tax and kind of the impact of the land
Yeah.
being rolled into this year with the negative tax.
So on the whole, all articles, the only warrant article that has a financial impact that has to end up with a number on it is your operating budget, because it either ends up with an operating budget or default. Every other warrant article that has a financial amount on it really is a yes or a no. You're gonna raise that amount or you're not gonna raise that amount. So the operating budget and default budget article is the only one that's directly compared to what is the current tax rate. So currently, right now, the tax rate is $13.96. So this article is compared to that. So anything less than $13.96, it would become a reduction. So one of the reasons there is a reduction is that with the land no longer being for sale, that $497,000 will be going back to the taxpayers. That's with the valuation that we're using, which is the same as the town, which is 2 million more than was the valuation from last year, the actual one from last year, that 497,000 would be equivalent to 41 cents.
So it's not truly a reduction of 19 cents. It's an increase, but we have enough additional to knock it back down.
It's a decrease by law.
I understand that, but it's just like we're not either the whole.
It's just like no
zero-
pay, it's just like
no
zero
tax-
impact first year?
so it's actually an
Exactly.
increase of 33
So it's
cents.
an
So
increase,
when
but we're
this was
hiding
brought
it.
up last night, that was brought up as well. When I brought up this, it was brought up that one of the main reasons for this is the 497,000. I also said one of the reasons for this is last year we put 470,000 into, to finish phase 2 work at the middle school. That obviously is coming off of the budget as well, because that's a one-time appropriation, and that we're not gonna keep adding on to that. So that was explained last night. Now, as far as what number shows up on there, as far as reduction, that I'm required to put a certain number. But there is reasons behind that, which
Is there,
which you stated.
I wish we could say, but 2025 impact is an increase, because it is an increase. We're just masking it by returning money.
There's no smoke and mirrors here, Carrie.
I'm not asking, I don't think I said that you're deliberately trying to hide it. What I'm saying is, the way the math works out is that we have an increase, but we're giving back more on a one-time thing that's not gonna exist next year.
I don't
So
think-
even though there's a decrease this year, it is an effective increase in spending.
I don't think it's deliberative. I think the average voter who looks at this thinks that the budget has gone down and it's a negative impact without fully
And
understanding
then next year, what the heck?
what Mr. Totten just laid out.
I agree with that.
So,
Using.
at the end of June 30th, you had a grant, was it, that you received that then at that point gave back to the taxpayers, correct?
That was for 200,000.
Okay, so let me just finish my question. So that was received by you, given back to the taxpayers. Was the only reason why then that would show no tax impact is because you waited and just did it as an encumbrance? It almost feels like
That was
this is the
That
same,
went
this is
back.
the same thing?
That went back immediately, so that's part of the current tax rates. So that was impacted into
December's bill.
December's,
December. So
yeah.
that's one of the reasons why it was $13.96 instead of, I believe, what was on the warrant added up to $14.40 or something like that.
All right, so let me go back to my question. Why then, this time, are we using that money to show a reduction in the tax rate versus last year when you gave back that 200-something thousand?
That was this year, and we didn't know about it.
Yep.
Right, we
Well,
didn't-
I mean, when
timing of
did, you received the funding well
So-
before June 30th, right?
Information about that increase in adequacy aid, which they called an immediate increase in adequacy aid, came out in September.
Okay,
So in September, the school board had a choice of either using it to reduce taxes or having a special meeting. It would have been a simplified special meeting in order to raise appropriations. The school board chose to reduce taxes with, I think it was a 5-0 or 4-0 vote at that time. But it could not have factored into the March meeting from last year because it wasn't found out until September. So it's the timing of it. So what happened was instead of in March when people voted for the operating budget and the land, I don't know if I can get to it quickly, but it was with the understanding that the estimated tax impact was around like $14.40. It came down to $13.96, partly because of that, partly because of the increase in fund balance that was returned to the taxpayers as well.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Taylor?
I mean, it does, I just don't like the idea that it's being used to manipulate the tax rate.
Well, it's not being used to manipulate the tax.
Well,
rate.
I mean,
It's the math that I have to follow and the number that has to come on. I understand
It's
when
the-
people see
It's the use of the
it,
timing to, show a negative rate instead
and
of.
trust me, I would have much rather have had the land. So we would have much rather have had the land.
And according to
building.
to that Warren article, June 30th is the only day that you can return that back to the taxpayers? It can't be returned
No matter when
upon
we return it, it's not gonna be factored into the next tax rate setting, which is in October, November.
I had asked that question, though, why can't we just return it now, right? And it has to lapse, and the lapse is at the end of the school year.
So then.
The lapse isn't when the agreement dissolves?
That will be in 2029 technically.
Well, no, I mean the Warren article.
Warren article.
Okay, so the agreement dissolving has nothing to do with it. It has to be the Warren article.
So if the
It's
agreement,
lapsing within a fiscal year, because I had that exact question with the attorney. Originally, when I worded as suggested Warren, I had it lapsing like February 1st or something. And he said, no, it has to lapse on June 30th because that's when your budget closes. These funds are no longer necessary. It lapses and goes back as fund balance at that point. So it was,
So how can we use it if it hasn't, in the budget, if it hasn't yet lapsed? So we're returning it in February, but it doesn't.
This is next year's budget.
This is next year's
This is
budget,
FY
and this
25
is
budget.
an estimated tax impact. And this is- as we estimate the 497, that's not an estimate, that's a highly known thing that we're returning the 497,000.
But we don't include the money that we anticipate underspending this year, do we, immediately? Well,
We
do keep it,
included
Know that it's-
200,000, I
We do
included
200.
200,000.
But it's not always that way, sometimes it beefs that number up, why can't we just do that later? Why can't we just return this on July 1st and then have it impact the DRA filing in the fall?
I think whenever this gets returned, it's not gonna go out in individual checks to taxpayers of Litchfield. So
No.
it's all, no matter when it gets returned, it's going to be impactful of
Right.
when we do the tax rate setting in October, November.
Which is the one I'd rather impact, because there's an increase in the budget that is being masked by this return. So if we returned it for the second bill, then we'd have a similar situation to what we just had, where my $14 was $13. It'd be a similar situation, it's just, I'm curious as to why we can't just push this to the second half of the
It would
year.
be nice to reference FY '24 approved budget
Because
in this article to reflect on.
What was the budget approved budget, without the warrant articles? Was it 25 million and change?
Go back and look. Let's go
You know,
back and
this,
look.
this way the taxpayer, the voter can see that it has gone up, even though there's a negative, tax impact.
Because next year we'll have those angry emails again, be like, but my taxes went down 19 cents. What happened?
So
Well,
I guess could a compromise be, if assuming legal would allow this to be put in there, to Mr. Leary's point, for the purposes set forth herein, totaling 26,378,939, which is a 3.5% increase over FY24 budget.
or which is the combined total of this year's budget plus the return of the 497,000. Because what's going to happen is people are going to see this. Hey, my number went down this year. Now I can vote yes on a bunch of other things because they even out. Oh crap! Next year I don't have the same negative, and the yeses I voted for hurt more. So I think if there's a way to reference in the article, say yeah, okay, it's which is the combined total of this year's budget plus the return of the land purchase for the purchase we're not actually purchasing. Because to make it clear that this isn't only the operating budget, there's actually a sizable return.
But if you add up all the tax impacts of all the articles, say they all pass,
Mhm.
would that,
Next year, you don't have the negative, next year you have only the positive.
no, I know, but I'm saying you're
No, it's like
It's still going
80
down.
cents. No, it would go up.
So if I see this at, I'm getting a 19-cent reduction,
Next
oh
year we
look,
go
the
up.
50-cent, 6-cent one
Does
doesn't
it
hurt
impact
so
as
much.
negative?
Next year you have to pay the full freight.
No, if you add up the other ones that have a positive.
Well, that's what I'm saying, so I don't see where anybody would have a question of, yeah, my taxes are going up, because when you add them all up, if they were to
It's
all
not this
pass,
year,
it
it's
will go up.
next year. Next year when you don't have
FY
500 grand
26.
to offset it. It's artificially depressing this year's rate. Next year, it's gonna be, you have to make up that difference plus whatever ad goes onto it. It's
So
gonna be,
next year's tax impact is gonna hurt more.
yeah, it's gonna be a wild swing.
So Doug, in a clean world, all right, in a clean world, the 500,000 for the school, the land, and all the other warrant articles, if you were to take the tax impact, removing all of that, what is the tax impact? Is it 33 cents?
The land is 41 cents.
Okay, so, no, but you're taking this budget over last year. If you don't have any of the other stuff included,
22.
what is the
Yeah.
tax impact? 22 cents?
22.
Positive 22 cents,
Plus 22,
plus 22.
okay.
If my math is correct.
There,
Is that right?
There's 19.
Because it'll be 19 when you take the reduction of the 135,000. Did we have a motion on that, by the way? Didn't we motion that?
No, you did
Yeah.
not motion.
Okay, thanks. I got lost there for a second.
I think I started one.
I thought you
Started
did.
Yeah.
I
don't
really,
think
I
second,
really.
though.
Yeah, I don't know. We got sidetracked on that. Bob, to answer your question, if that passes and there's a reduction of $135,000 from the budget, the tax impact would be negative 19 cents. When you offset that with the 41 cents from the land, it's a positive tax impact of 22 cents.
Could we use the money from the 497 to fund, can we, if the warrant article lapses, but couldn't it be reallocated? They say we, instead of doing just put a 497 towards the investment of a new built up a school? And that way you pull it out of returning and we just put it somewhere else, so it's like,
The warrant article is for the land.
I know, but I
Right.
don't like what happened, I don't like the math of how the one-time big return masks.
Right, but trust me, if you
We all
don't
agree
return that money from that warrant article with the
Well,
way that it
you
was
have
written
to-
last year, you're gonna see,
No, I'm not
people
saying
ready to
just
riot
turn
out
it,
there.
I'm just saying, could you use a warrant article and say, hey, we're not using this purchase, town of Litchfield, there's this money, are you okay with us putting, I just, that way you separate the two, but apparently we can't.
Yeah, but then it's just offsetting future years, it's doing the same thing, just.
Yeah, but then my operating budget actually
Okay.
reflects the increase.
I want to pull us back together here. I think we had a motion that I can't recall whether it had a second or
I
not.
made a motion to update the bottom line number to the number that Mr. Totten's gonna tell us in a minute.
That
was really
motion to
clear.
do- Okay. I didn't know if also the motion was to eliminate the transfer too, so
What was that?
I guess.
The
for
additional 135,000.
one
No, we reduced it by 135,000, right?
Right. Yeah, it was $26,243,939.
That is correct.
That's the number.
I'll second that.
Second. Any discussion on that particular item, reducing $135,000 from the operating budget?
Copy.
Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Cutter?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Douglas?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Barca? Mr.
Yes.
Burke? Motion passes 9-0-0. So that's a reduction of $135,000, bringing the new operating budget amount to $26,243,939, which now has, Mr. Totten, can you update that tax impact, please, to 19 cents?
Yeah, so what's the operating now? 19?
19.
Yep.
We're working on a different doc, so I got it.
Okay.
So is that the same motion that would be needed, as far as our budget changes by school board and budget committee to reduce the operating budget? Do we need another?
That's what
motion?
we just
that was
did. We
You guys
just did that.
so it covered both those things.
Correct. Yeah, but the school, to his point from earlier, the school has, yeah, he's writing that in there right now. The school has to revote the recommendation because the number changed.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay. So 900 was a,
correct. All right. Any new discussion on Article 2? Article 3.
Oh, do we
Oh,
have to
so wait a
vote for
second,
Article?
No, no,
Not
no.
voting,
we didn't
not
vote.
voting.
We're not voting tonight.
Okay.
The only vote was the changing the,
Oh, that's right, we weren't voting anything, gotcha.
yes.
I like
Other than we did vote on the operating budget itself, but yes. All right, Article 3. Shall the Litchfield School District vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached with, I'm sorry, let me restart that. Shall the Litchfield School District vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Litchfield School District and the Litchfield Education Association, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing level over those paid in the prior fiscal year. Year 24-25, estimated increase of $679,707. Year 25-26, estimated increase of $634,719. And further to raise and appropriate the sum of $679,707 for fiscal year 2025, such sum representing the additional cost attributable to the increase in salaries and benefits required by the new agreement over those that would be paid at current staffing levels. Estimated tax impact is 56 cents. Recommended by the school board 500. Discussion, questions on Article 3.
This is a really important warrant article for the school, right? People first. We have teachers and soon-to-be support staff in the discussion following this evening that are working their tails off day in and day out, right? This is a responsible contract at 5% for the first year and 4.75% for the second year. While there weren't any changes to the healthcare, as highlighted earlier this evening, there were changes that are important to making our district better, such as coverage for staff, coverage for recesses that the staff weren't responsible for prior, that now they are. It sets us, there are changes in the contract that set us up for a better, more efficient school system, And I want to publicly thank once again the superintendent, Chairman Ames, and all the other individuals who were responsible for getting this together, because I can tell you, significant time went into this contract.
Dr. Jetty, Mr. Totten, any additional comments on Article 3?
I'm assuming the budget committee had access to
We did.
the actual TA, right?
We
So you
shared
saw all
that,
language. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Shared
on
that last
night.
last evening, yes, last evening.
I sent it during our meeting.
Yes.
He has it.
I
so.
forwarded that on to the budget committee.
And again, this was, this contract was reached in a mediation process on Monday, the 18th of December. So I know the budget committee was frustrated that the timeline was lagging, but that's what we had to do in order to get that done.
Can you explain what happened after the 18th, because you did it last night, and I
Yeah,
think
so-
it explains why we didn't have it on the 21st.
We reached the agreement at 8:30, 9 o'clock on Monday, the 18th. And then the next step is the LEA has to take it to their membership, which they did on Wednesday. They provided 1-day notice. They had a meeting on Wednesday afternoon. Their bylaws state they then have to wait 1 day so that people can talk, ask questions, get things clarified. And then they voted on Friday, the 22nd. So I got a text message late in the day on Friday, the 22nd, that it had passed and been ratified. And of course, we're into Christmas week at that point, but
And then at that point, it had to be ratified by the school board.
that's correct. And so the next opportunity to do that was last night's board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions, discussions on Article 3?
Just one comment, I mean, I certainly support it, however, I will just state on the record that it is going to impact the ability to expand services based on a certain threshold that taxpayers can hit. And I think we've talked about it before, it's 80+% is, salary, benefits, and retirement. This is going to hinder, the parents out there are not gonna be able to get well-paid teachers and every program that they want for their kid. It's just impossible, because there's just no way we can grow at that kind of rate.
Anything else? All right, Article 4. Shall the Litchfield School District, and by the way, these, Article 4 and Article 6 do not require Budget Committee recommendations.
I do want to thank the school board for actually putting them on the warrants, because there had been debate in the past, which resulted in a very interesting fall one year. But
Yep.
I'm glad to see them actually on the warrant article, on the ballot, so thank you.
Yep, I'll just read them quickly into the record. Article 4, shall the Litchfield School District, if Article 3 is defeated, authorize the Litchfield School Board to call one special meeting at its option to address Article 3 cost items only, recommended by the school board 410. Article 5, shall the Litchfield School District vote to approve the cost items included in an agreement to modify the 2022-25 collective bargaining agreement reached between the Litchfield School District and the Litchfield Support Staff Association, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at current staffing levels over the amount that would be paid under the existing contract. Year 23-24, appropriation already in the FY 23-24 budget, estimated increase of $170,951. Year 24-25, estimated increase of $279,103. And further to raise and appropriate the sum of $279,103 for fiscal year 24-25, such sum representing the additional cost attributable to the increase in salaries and benefits required by the new agreement over those that would be paid at current staffing levels. Estimated tax impact is 23 cents, recommended by the school board 500. Questions or discussions on Article 5? Mr. Cutter gave context on this earlier in his update. Mr. Cutter, Dr. Jetty, Mr. Totten, any additional context?
Also, immensely critical to running our school system. Just to put it in context, our board has had many recent conversations about not being able to open schools. Think about that. You wouldn't be able to send your kids to school for a day, 2. We don't have the staff to clean it. We're that close. We're that close because we cannot hire people. Some of these salary schedules in our LSSA start at $12. Think about that. We have to do better. This contract is a 1-year contract that is responsible. It's using money for at least the retroactive portion back to January 1st of 2024, right? Using money already in our operating budget. We're not raising and appropriating or asking for any additional money to fund that. We're gonna pay that because it's the right thing to do, giving money to the people who are working their tails off to keep our schools open, right? The ask here is to increase the salary schedules for FY '25 only. And then this is up for contract negotiations again next year, which we'll talk about whatever's next. Anything to add?
No, I think you hit all the right talking points on this. I mean, we're at a critical point. Had I known the board meeting was gonna last such a short time last night, I mean, it was great to be out in only 5 hours. I would have made this point. I would have said, here are the openings that we currently have. Paraprofessional, 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 paraprofessional. I would have said it 26 times, because that's what we have for openings right now.
Custodian,
And then
custodian.
Custodian. I just said 13 paraprofessionals at GMS, 13 at LMS, 1 at the high school. It's actually 27. But my point with that is, that's how dire it is. And, you know, I know the question is how some of these positions go away. They are necessary. We're scraping by. But
So I guess the counter to that, and I brought this up last year, but obviously now we've gone yet another year. So let's say, for example, and I don't know as far as what the allocation looks like, but let's just say at Campbell, you've got three slots for a first shift custodian. We've seen that obviously you can function with less than 3. Why not eliminate that third position, take the money and pay the other 2 for the hard work that they're doing? Because you already know that that's a good employee. You've been able to open up the school doors all the time. Have you considered re-examining the head count, and instead of looking at having big numbers? Now, paras are completely different, because I get that then, you know what, one para can't, if they're one-on-one, they can't be jumping between 2 kids. Like, that's not the way that it works. But like in other support services, have you considered a reallocation of resources to give better pay?
Yeah, and if I may, at the high school, so we have 1 person during the day, and there should be 4 at night. We have 1 at night. So that's 1 person doing 112,000 square feet. That means the way we're getting by is teachers are taking their own dump out. You know, people are vacuuming their own spaces. They're just doing this stuff, because if they weren't doing that, it would be really bad.
Right,
You know,
so
that
if you
custodian
have
could only
4,
hit.
and you have 1 doing it now, why not pay the 1 more, plus the second more, via eliminating the other 2 positions? So that way you get better.
It doesn't mean you can hit the level of cleaning that would be appropriate in a school. So the way the staffing levels, let me go back to the staffing levels, they're set by the square footage of the building and the level of cleaning that you want. We're not achieving the top level, which is hospital grade. We're not at that level. We're in between a 2 and a 3, depending on the space. And you simply divide out the number of square feet, and that's how you end up with your staffing levels. So there's a price to pay. If you go back to fewer people, they will be asked to do more, and the cleaning level will not. Over time, it'll show the wear and tear on the building, because it's not going to be kept up to the same
The
level.
other alternatives have been looked at, and I know you guys, there are people who are reluctant, but outsourcing.
Well,
My
there's
school,
a thing
my
called a
school,
union that says no.
well, if we, I appreciate that, but I thought there was also an MOU that if you, or some part of the contract that I read that says if you cannot provide the staffing, then we have the ability to find out.
The board has actually
What the
discussed
union-
robots.
I've actually considered getting a Roomba for my classroom, but I'm just saying that
What the union's gonna say is you need to increase wages so we can hire the people. The reason the outsourcing works, it costs you more money in the long run, because you're paying the overhead of the company that we don't have. You absolutely are, and
I have there's a cleaning crew at my, I guarantee you they don't have the budget we have. So I appreciate the view of that. I would consider that it should be something we look at.
Additional discussion on Article 5.
Every building that I've worked in, every time I've been there, they've looked at cutting costs, and one of the first things they do is bring the cleaning crew in-house to cut costs.
We
Because the
outsource them
service
because we
was
don't have the
too
money.
expensive.
So I'm just
That's
telling
more
you,
than double.
Sure.
You gotta pay the overhead, you gotta pay the owner.
Right.
you're
I
paying a
would take a
manager.
look at it.
It's not there. There's definitely incremental costs that go with that.
All right,
I
I'd love to see the analysis.
Well, I think if we can't hire for 17, 18, I don't know how an outside agency could hire for 17, 18, so they're hiring for hire, and then there's overhead on top of that. So I
Believe me.
wish we could hire for 17.
Believe me, my school doesn't have the budget this school has, and we have cleaning crews come through. So I'm just saying, take a look. All I'm asking for is the research. I'm not asking for a solution today. I'm asking, if our concern is we cannot potentially be put in the position, we can't open because we can't clean, well, then we need to find an alternate solution. And if we cannot find staff, then we need to consider alternatives. That's what we owe the taxpayers, it's what we owe the parents.
I'll say, I said this on the town side and talking about the highway position and talking about the police, people first. I applaud you all taking a step to take care of the people that are doing sometimes this thankless work.
Mhm.
I think that's an incredibly important thing to do. And so I think it wasn't something that I think when we first started talking about warrant articles that was on the radar anywhere, and I appreciate the board being flexible enough to, bring this to the table, bring this to the voters, and recognize the need there, so.
Can I just talk that timeline? Because the board, on the 21st, after we had reached the tentative agreement, we were able to get the details of that, just in terms of where it was and so forth. The board then said we need to do something with our support staff. That was on the 21st.
Of December.
Of December. We met with the support staff over Christmas break. We had ground rule discussion, like what are we looking to do? How can we achieve it? How can we work together? It was an incredibly positive, upbeat meeting. And then we sat down and we negotiated all day on Monday the 2nd, as in 2 days ago, and reached a tentative agreement that went to the board last night, and now you're looking at the details of that. And I would remind you also that the great majority of people who are covered by this are your neighbors. They live here in Litchfield. That's who we're talking about. The great majority are, in fact, residents, and investing in making sure that we can keep that workforce going is really important. And this is more money, by the way, than we've ever spent in our collective bargaining with our support staff. But given where we are with the economy and the wages that are being offered in other sectors, this is what we have to do to stay competitive.
Well, and just to the paras, I totally get where you are, because I have students with one-to-ones who don't have one-to-ones because there are no paras. So I appreciate it, I just don't know, and I see the salaries, and I get where you're coming from, but I don't necessarily think that raising the salary is gonna be your silver bullet. I'm not saying it's not warranted, I'm not saying it's not needed, I'm saying it's not your silver bullet, because I think there's a big shortage.
Oh, hell,
So
it's a systemic problem.
It's a nationwide shortage, but right now, we need some capacity to attract people out of remote jobs that want to get out of the house, they want to get back into the workforce, and if they're looking for something, can they choose us over some other setting? Right now, we offer people jobs and they laugh. They literally laugh and say, no thanks, and walk away. It's happened over and over again.
So we're living on hope right now, which is a tough way to live. We hope that somebody will apply. We hope when we give them the salary that they're not gonna laugh. We hope that they'll at least consider it. We're looking to go to a fighting chance. I agree, I think there's other factors in there too.
Yep.
But we need at least a fighting chance to hire the people who are working with the kids in Litchfield, cleaning, and,
And I sincerely hope you find the people, because I can tell you if you knew my salary, we'd laugh too. Because because you have to be in it for the right reasons. You have to, and I totally get it. And like I say, I think there's a bigger situation. While the money, it hurts to see the increase, but when I see what the increase is, you're right. It's Dunkin' Donuts, but I totally get. But I also want to say that the people who choose to do this work, God bless you, because it is. You want the people who are in there for the kids anyway.
So I do have
maybe-
one final question.
Yeah.
I assume that based on the LSSA agreement, you have to offer the increase across the board to all LSSA staff?
So,
Or can you selectively do it for those positions that are working multiple jobs?
yeah, so when you look at the tentative agreement, there are 5 different salary schedules that are in there. And there were some areas that were a higher priority than other areas. And custodians and paras, which are the main openings that we have, were the higher priorities.
Okay, so as far as like administrative staff, for example, are they going to benefit from this? Because
There are
it was
increases.
school board and school administration decision to put extra workload on them by eliminating the receptionist at LMS and CHS. So they're getting a benefit based on the cut that the school decided to make last year?
No, that was not part of the conversation. There are increased wages, in those areas, but they're not as high as they were in the custodial area.
Sure, but they're still getting some sort of
Much
an
better benefit.
increase,
They
even
definitely
though,
are.
like, for example, we've talked about the one custodian that has to clean the whole school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, makes sense that that person gets but then for an administrative assistant to get an increase as well, but that was self-inflicted by the school by eliminating one person in that.
We're giving them a decent increase, not to the same percentage-wise as a custodian, but much more than they would typically get for administrative assistants, partly because we want to keep them. If you lose an administrative assistant, there's a lot of knowledge that leaves with that person too. So yes, they are getting an increase, so.
That was
All right.
my next question. Are these increases comparable to surrounding
matter
districts
how
so that
long
we're
they
not
do.
losing? To also additionally retain people, not just like attract people, but
Yeah,
to
the,
just
step
retain.
one is to stop the bleeding, right? So we are losing people and we want to retain them. And then step two is to have salaries that will attract people in.
Okay, so it's not way higher than than the districts around us. It's
No, we're-
comparable.
Correct.
I heard the
Thank you.
comment that when the analysis was done on salaries before this proposal, we were close to the bottom.
Yeah.
Was that true?
It
was. I thought it was made during the school board meeting last night.
So in some areas we were at the bottom, and in other areas we were more competitive.
So if that was the case, why wasn't it addressed in 2022 when the contract was?
Honestly, in 2022, so this is an interesting story. We had the two CBAs I had seen, we had spent about $50,000 in salary pool. In 2022, we doubled that to 100,000, and we felt like, wow, we really got after this and we addressed it. None of us foresaw what was going to happen with. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're looking at Lowe's or Home Depot or Dunkin' Donuts. Everybody is just increasing wages to go after the pool, and so what we found is what we thought was going to work proved not to work in reality. So this is why we're doing this.
All right, we're gonna.
Just quickly, my problem with this, and the reason for my vote against this one, as much as I'll support the teacher one, is that 2 years ago, we signed, it was a good faith contract put out to the voters, and they approved it. It was negotiated. Just before negotiation, or before the school year started, you gave certain members of the support staff raises on a sidebar. So you did that, so they got a raise then, they got their regular raise, they got a new contract with a raise, and the contract has not run its course. I'm a firm believer, if you sign a contract, you live to that contract. When it's time for a new contract, you make a new contract. So I won't support this because of that. You're basically saying, yeah, we signed a contract 2 years ago, but let's forget about it. Let's do something
That's
new.
not what we're saying. though.
That's what you're saying. You're saying disregard it.
We're not giving the money.
disregarding. What we're saying is that the contract is not attracting the workforce. If we have this many unfilled positions, then the contract is not working.
Again.
And it's important.
You have one coming up in a year.
Well,
Fix it then.
But we'll have more bleeding between now and then, and we'll
sets a
have
bad
more
precedent.
unfilled positions between
It
now
sets a
and then.
bad
Bob, how
precedent.
many town positions make less than $15 an hour?
There's a few.
Yeah, I looked at the budget, there wasn't.
There's
I
a
looked,
few,
there was
mostly
none.
part-timers, yeah.
So we're
Part-timers.
down probably over 50% of the pairs.
And Derek, I'm not saying don't pay them, I'm saying wait till the contract comes up, then adjust your pay scale.
I think the problem is you'll have a lot of people
I
quitting
think
before that.
I think the timing of it is, and I think it goes back to.
People have
Mr.
been leaving in droves from this district for years, and it's not just the money.
I think it goes to Mr. Hayes's question about 2022. I think when these agreements were put in place, the competitive jobs were not what they are right now. And I think if you look at any of the surrounding jobs that are paying hourly wages and what they were 2 or 3 years ago, those have vastly changed. I think the two coming together and working collaboratively to find an agreement that works on both sides outside of a contract, if that's what's best for the school district and best for the association, I think at the end of the day, it goes forward to the voters, and the voters decide, whether they approve it or not.
To me, it just seems like there's a lot of asks of the taxpayers. We should be looking at other asks of the school itself. Like, look at the athletics budget. Like, okay, we want all this. Well, then we can't do a brand new team here. We can't do this, that, and the other thing. If it's people first, then the people who are paying the bill hopefully can still afford their houses. Because I know it's just on top of last year's big tax bill, the upcoming big tax bill with a lot of big asks. I just think that we keep going to the taxpayer and we're not doing enough. We're just.
All right.
And to put it in relative terms, this is a 23-cent tax impact. The entire town tax impact with warrant articles is 23 cents. Now, you're talking about, what's there, 120 people in the LSSA?
Roughly.
Yeah. Of which about 15 maybe are paying members now? Because I know it's dropped way out. So you're asking the same thing that the town is providing for 8,800 residents in one warrant article. And I'm looking at all these, and this is just a continued, it's a spending spree. It's just more and more and more and more. And more people are getting driven out of town. And again, this is about what's right and what's wrong. You have a contract, live to the contract. When the contract's up, change the terms.
Any new discussion or questions on Article 5? All right, Article 6, which is a repeat of Article 4. Shall the Litchfield School District, if Article 5 is defeated, authorize the Litchfield School Board to call one special meeting at its option to address Article 5, cost items only, recommended by the school board 410. Article 7, and Mr. Cutter or Mr. Totten and Dr. JD, I'll let you speak to this because you mentioned that the school board had not voted on this one yet. Article 7, shall the Litchfield School District vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $178,756 to be added to the Employee Benefits Reserve Fund established in 2022 for the purpose of funding the payment of negotiated employee benefits, including but not limited to health insurance reimbursements, changes in coverage or policies chosen by employees, severance benefits, and such other benefits as are from time to time negotiated and become contractual obligations of the district. This sum to come from the June 30 fund balance available for transfer on July 1 of this year with no additional amount to be raised from taxation. This amount is consistent with the amount raised for severance payments that were not paid out in fiscal year 2023 and therefore will be paid out in subsequent years.
Question. What, and I'm sure I asked this question last year and I clearly have forgotten. Health insurance reimbursements. I get the changes in coverage because changes in status, somebody could change. I don't like it that it's covered by here, but I get it. What does health insurance reimbursements mean?
If they don't take it, do you have a buyout? Because that's what the town has.
I think that's exactly it.
That's exactly
Yeah, so there's a buyout if an employee does not take the insurance, and we do an estimate, there's a line in the budget for that, but if we had a bunch of people who did not do that, and we needed to have funds available.
So, but why would it come out of here when we generally budget for their health insurance and it's supposed to cost us less? So why would it be over?
You're always doing an estimate. So what if, I mean, it's worst case scenario, that's why this exists, right? It's a blanket policy to kind of cover you in that. So you have a bunch of people leave who take single insurance, they're replaced with people taking family. You had a placeholder of 2 persons, but it's gonna cost you more. At the same time, you have more people taking reimbursements. I mean, what is it that drives you to have to tap into this would be the question. And it's, again, that worst case scenario, Carrie. So it could be a combination of the reimbursement changes, changes in coverage, or the policies themselves.
I just don't like, my hope had been originally that this would be limited to severance, unpaid severance. I don't like how it's been a mishmash of other things. I mean, I'll likely support it because I want the money banked there anyway, but I don't like it. I do not like how it's structured.
You loved it last year.
Well, I did. No, I didn't. I said I would
Pretty
take
positive
it.
about it last year.
My idea was to bank the severance, unpaid severance. Somehow it evolved beyond my control, and again, last minute warrant articles, not a lot of time to review. So I don't like, I'm just telling you, I don't like how it's been evolved into bigger than, so I don't. My proposal was that we keep funding severance. People are like, hey, I'm retiring, severance. Oh, we didn't retire, general fund. Next year, same person, I'm retiring. So we kept funding the same retirement. That was my proposal. It was not my proposal ever.
But
to
if
include
you
health
think about it,
insurance.
last year, the voters and the case that we made here was that we were gonna seed it with 100,000 last year. Correct.
Yep.
And that was, that really was about the health insurance component of it, so that you have that buffer, that's set aside now. Now, the 178, those are actual people that told us they were gonna retire and did not, and now we're banking that, and we're never gonna raise it again, it'll come out of there.
All
in
right,
the
so,
future.
so
you-
my concern, so where I would go with this is if we tap into that beyond what we set aside for severance, I would be very upset. So like, if we say these 3 people, I'm going to retire, we bank the money, and then 2 years later they decide to retire, but we've tapped into all that money because of 14 different healthcare changes, and now the money we set aside for the severance doesn't exist
When
anymore.
you keep adding to it.
That's not
year
gonna
over
happen.
So each dollar for the severance is tied to a person.
Okay.
And so, I mean, that's one of the reasons why the default went down too, because we were able to take money out of the budget
Right.
and have it in here, so, but each is tied to a dollar, so you're right, I appreciate the fact that we have severance now in there, so we don't have that fluctuating. So I think that was a strong point for you. Now, a strong point for us was to also have a little bit of wiggle room with health insurance as well. And so we have $100,000 to play with right now. Is any of that money leaving?
Do not say play with in this room.
Just throw around. So
To cover
we have $100,000 to use. But we're not as of now, we're not using any of that this year.
No, I know.
Is that
what
because you
bugs
haven't
me
had an open enrollment since this fund was established?
That's because the budget,
in the
we
past
didn't
we
have the
absorbed it.
bad case scenario occur. So the budget, which again is always an estimate, was able to absorb the changes that occurred. So this is, if we had that bad case scenario. There's another piece too. So we've now banked the money based upon the current separation. The rules are the longer a person stays, the more they're entitled to. So you have to have a buffer built in, so now the 100,000 might be used to fund some of that. So that's why we did that initial
No, it's
seed.
not, because you included an adjustment in the budget. That's.
No, it won't, necessarily won't be. Next year, it will go up by, I don't know what we'll add into it, but parts of it, like 2,000 or 3,000, will be attributed to bigger chunks that are this 178.
And I
per
totally
person.
get that. I totally get it. It's on today's retirement. If they decide next year, well, they've accrued that much more, we should budget that. But to say we're gonna tap into the budget the fund to cover that, well, that's not real. So, but the reality is, if we're saying that we are no longer absorbing in the costs for health insurance changes that we once absorbed, what I'm hearing is we can tighten up our budget, just so you know.
Can one of you speak to why the school board didn't vote on this yet?
Sure. You'll note that there's a highlight at the bottom of this article with some italics. We weren't sure last night if this was a comment or an edit by the legal team that reviewed these articles, and so we want a clarification if this was
Intended to be printed.
should be removed, if it's more information that goes in a voter guide. Like, we just wanted a little clarity before we voted on that.
It was, did you highlight that?
So I
highlight
typed
that?
this
Who
up
highlighted that?
pretty quickly, knowing it was gonna go to legal. We got it back from legal, they deleted one word, but then somehow that got highlighted, so we were a little unsure of what happened there, so. I was assuming they were gonna make more adjustments, but.
The board is in favor of this article, no doubt. We just wanted clarity before voting.
Well, I would love to see it
So-
printed on the ballot. in the
You're
warrant.
not gonna
It's not
vote
called-
on it though until after the budget hearing, so I assume at the budget hearing, we'll have this clarified.
We'll have to leave it there, won't we?
Okay. All right. Any other discussion or questions on Article 7?
I think it's a good article.
If you're more comfortable, you could add it into your January 25th meeting.
That wasn't necessary. Article 8. Shall the Litchfield School District vote to raise and appropriate 50% of the fund balance remaining after Article 7 is funded, up to a sum of $125,000 to be added to the Building Maintenance Capital Reserve Fund established in 2005 for the purpose of funding school capital improvements, building maintenance, and repairs in the Litchfield School District, with said funds to come from the June 30 fund balance available for transfer on July 1 of this year, with no additional amount to be raised from taxation. Estimated tax impact $0, 0 cents, recommended by school board by a vote of 5-0-0.
How much is currently in that balance? How much is currently in the fund?
That's in your monthly reports that we send to you.
So I have a person here with computers who can easily give me the answer. That's why I'm asking. Because I also think that the town used to include, did the town include like current balance and whatnot in theirs?
Which one was that? That was a
Believe
cap.
we did.
Number
That's
8.
the capital
Improvement.
building maintenance.
Is as of 232,829, but plus some interest.
And what is the goal of the amount in this?
I mean, at one point it was,
Like 750,000, something.
Was it, this one was that much? I don't
Was
think,
it the other one?
No, this
the other
one
one,
was,
this one I thought we had a
Building
goal of
maintenance.
250.
this one was around 350
Yeah, that's the
before.
number I remember.
So I think that, I mean, my goal is somewhere between 350 and 400. I don't know what other people's goals are.
and
I
to,
guess the question was based on what? Like, what are you using to determine your ideal amount?
like if the cost of what goes out, like a boiler.
It's more than, whole boiler went out at the high school, plus some compressors, things like that. So, I mean, the high school, which is the newest building, is showing its age. Our goal is not to have to tap into that, but yeah, it's more, we made section improvements at the high school boiler or fixes, but the whole boiler went out. We tend to kind of average a compressor every other year now at the high school, so if we kind of got hit by a couple different things, if
How
the
much is it?
underground sprinkler went out too, that's gonna happen at some point, so.
So I guess in that case, then, I guess I'd like to, we have a lot of things that we know are coming, so how come we don't have like an actual, do we have a plan for these? Or are we gonna wait till it actually goes out to fix it?
So it's in the capital improvement plan. So that was what was kind of grouped together in that mini bond, with the work at the middle school for the parking lot as well. But I think it is still
So if we're
several years
gonna
out.
bond it, we're anticipating bonding it, then why do I need money in the reserve for it?
Because that's not for several years.
If it's that critical, why is it not for several years?
I
Are you suggesting
it's hard to say whether it's
you-
gonna happen. I can't tell you
Well,
what's
my
gonna
thing
happen
is,
or not.
if we know it's maintenance, why are we not using it as a warrant article to actually do the maintenance? Why are we building a fund, a rainy day fund for something we know is likely coming? And if it's so critical, why are we waiting? So it just, I worry about how we're handling known potential maintenance.
Maintenance and repairs.
So
Some of this is
this, again, this
Well,
building
no, it's
fund
foreseen. We just said it's going to happen.
was about, this
but not
building fund was 350,000.
Yeah.
Before it was reduced by 254,000. At that time, it seemed that the town was very happy for it to be at 350,000. This would get us back to what I perceived at that time that the town was wanting to
Yeah,
do.
this is your rainy day fund.
Well, I just, again, when I develop a rainy day, I need to have a basis for it. So I'm asking what the basis is for
The
this.
basis is we have
Just
what?
to, let's throw a number on the
significantly
board and see what
aged
sticks.
elementary school with, repairs that if a electrical box goes out, as we had a couple years ago, that's $100,000 cost right there.
So then I don't need 350.
So I think,
We amplify that against, Campbell High School being 20-plus years old, right? Hopefully, knock on wood, there's no problems at the middle school, but who knows?
So this is
It
again
better not be.
reactive behavior.
This is your
Harry, I
rainy day
think
fund.
I think what I'm hearing you ask is for us to articulate that, right? And so honestly, I'm not aware of a recent conversation about what the target or goal or what we ought to have in there. So I appreciate you raising it. I think we'll take it back to the board. We'll have the board make some guidance about what the right amount is.
Because otherwise, it's a round number. It sounds great, but it's round. That means what backs it up? What's propping up that number?
You've got a roof on the high school that is the original roof, right? Has that been
Windows,
replaced? You've got windows that are the original windows.
But at some point, though, those projects are of a size and of a known duration that they should be their own
She more
warrant
than 20 years
articles.
out of windows.
Just saying.
So I have a question, not
The
specifically
ones at
about
Griffin are probably 50.
this article, but more
There when I
about
was there.
They're
the
replacing a bunch
order
of them.
of the articles.
What they use them.
I'll wait for Andrew to listen to.
Certain parts of that was
Go ahead, Mr. Jones.
So, because the funding kind of trickles down, we heard a lot this year in regards to special ed and there was a lot of fluctuation, uncertainty. There were times that sky was falling, that, oh no, we think we're gonna get a lot more kids. Is there a reason why we don't see the special ed fund as one of the warrant articles being brought up? If there's been that much turbulence around special ed counts?
160,000.
We'll take another look at
Yeah,
that,
that's
thank
a
you.
Good point.
Because I mean, the 160, I mean, as we've talked about, I think last time,
Expendable trust fund,
110 can go like with one student going to one program.
spend it elsewhere, no school.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that.
Any other questions on Article
going
8
off of history.
or discussion? Article 9, last one for this evening. Shall the Litchfield School District vote to raise and appropriate 50% of the fund balance remaining after Article 7 is funded, up to a sum of $125,000 to be added to the Capital Improvements Expendable Trust Fund, established in 2020 for the purpose of funding the study, planning, and cost of new construction or renovation of existing facilities in the Litchfield School District, with said funds to come from the June 30 fund balance, available for transfer on July 1 of this year with no additional amount to be raised from taxation. This amount is consistent with the capital plan adopted by the town of Litchfield in September 2020. Estimated tax impact $0.00, recommended by the school board 500.
There is 253,000 on this one.
So I appreciated the conversation that was had on this, I think it was in December.
At the fire
But
station.
it wasn't clear to me. We're saying renovating, new construction consistent with the capital plan. As was pointed out, this has consistently been pushed as the GMS fund. So what other plans are in place for LMS and GMS that would fall under this? Because I would maintain, if the school passes, why do we need this?
Because we're 2 years out, you know, the building is gonna take 2 years.
I think there's a variety of reasons, but I don't know that the board has I think it's the same conversation that we just had a moment ago. The board hasn't specifically had that
So
discussion.
we're just gonna park money just because. That's the way we've done it, let's just keep doing
We
it.
have, there's other projects on the capital improvement.
That
There are.
require
CHS
major
or LMS?
renovation or new construction, please, like what?
Well, we included stadium lighting on the capital improvement plan.
The stadium
You're gonna
light-
go there, I mean.
The stadium lighting that was agreed to by the neighbors would never be installed
Yeah.
as part
Same.
of the football field, that
Artificial
stadium
field,
light?
right? I mean, there's a number of
Don't
things
need
that are
an
on the
artificial field.
I agree, right?
Why would
I'm
that
using
not be
as
its
a-
own warrant? You need we have
But this is-
250,
this is just
$375,000 to study whether or not we're gonna put turf in? Really?
I'm pretty sure that we have an LMS parking lot that, you know,
Why would that not be, that's a
why, that could be
pretty-
maintenance, right? So
That could be maintenance, that could
make-
be, under the other one, doesn't require brand new study. To me, this is a major capital improvement. We just spent a small fortune on LMS. We're looking at GMS, that leaves Campbell. What's on the plan? That would require us to continue funding this to this level.
So,
HVAC,
HVAC that we put a lot of money in through COVID.
Campbell.
What about Campbell? A building that's half occupied, what are we gonna do with it? We're probably not adding to it.
Do you have any ideas, Carrie?
My idea is this is unnecessary.
Kerry, I think it's back to the point of really, thanks for the feedback, we'll take it to the board, I think we need to have a deeper discussion about what those are. You know, I think the conversation changes if the school gets approved, for example, because it's like, okay, now we have this buttoned up, this is buttoned up, what's the right purpose? It's a moving target, so, but
So,
we'll take it back, we'll
Yeah,
have
I mean,
the,
if GMS passes,
my question on this is, should it say, because of, to Mr. Taylor's point about these being in order, should it say, shall Litchfield School District vote to raise and appropriate 50% of the fund balance remaining after Article 7 is funded and Article 8 is funded?
well, eight's 50%.
50%. That's why we use the 50%, which we could use a different number. So after Article 7 of the fund balance, 50% will go.
It's a 50-50
50.
split.
Yep.
Between the two.
Got it.
Yep.
And I think last year there were 3, it was like a 40-30-30 or something, it was,
Okay.
yeah, so it's,
Yeah, we
once you
had
get
no money
past
else than
what you
funded it.
funded, then whatever's left, you
Okay.
up to that cap.
Any new discussion on Article
I
9.
just want to clarify, is it accurate to say the capital plan adopted in September 2020? The new plan has not been adopted, or, so the 2020 plan is the current, right?
Just gets modified.
Okay, just want to make sure the
No, I
wording is
think
right.
it's readopted every,
The capital plan was adopted
was-
It
this
was
past year, or did, like,
readopted
It was
2023.
accepted.
what's the difference to you?
What's the difference?
Well, the town just took.
Well, we didn't endorse it, we just accepted it.
It's adopted either way.
It was adopted by the Capital
For
Improvement
the
Committee.
purposes, I
Capital
believe,
improvement.
of like impact favorite setting, because.
No, because
the
it's an annual
It's the
thing.
school capital improvement plan realistically, so.
As of November of 2023, it was adopted.
I think
Do we need that line at all?
Just put town Litchfield, period, boom.
But it's consistent with the capital plan, but it's always just been 125,000, and, because that's what used to be in the capital improvement plan, because we were only studying.
Let's be
I
honest, we
think
don't
it's
follow the
just
capital
an
improvement. Like, whatever's on the capital improvement plan, it doesn't matter. It's whoever has the loudest voice and wants to get,
Are you saying my hours put into that committee don't count?
Yes. I am. Sorry to say.
I wouldn't want to insult you, but yes.
anything else on Article 9 this evening?
It's highlighted to answer the question, do we need it?
I think that's a valid question, I just strike it and then.
And if we do, we'll update it to November 23.
Yes.
I don't
Alright.
have a problem with 8 or 9, I just think tying it in with Article 7, where you're talking about benefits for employees, and Article 8 goes right into, capital improvements. I mean,
Well,
that's,
they're trust
to me,
funds.
they're talking about people and projects. And they should be, they should have nothing to do with Article 7.
Well, because all of the money goes into, so it's a trickle down, right? So you fund Article 7.
No, I think
and
it should be
then
its own article.
Without, it is.
It
but
is doing what you said, Bob, yeah, because it's
all
saying
of it goes to Article 7.
every, Article 7 has to get filled before anything goes to 8 or 9.
Without the 50%, it goes 100% 8 and then 100% 9. By splitting it, you can do Article
I-
7 and then both.
No, I don't agree with that. I think Article 7 should be its own, because that's,
It is
you're
its
taking
own
care of
article.
your employees there.
It
It
is.
is,
It is
That's,
its own article.
that's
That's
the
the
first
So then
thing.
Article 8 should be its own thing. It should have nothing to do with Article 7.
it's,
has
Article
nothing to
8
do
is
with it,
just
it's
saying
just
it's
money's
gonna get
left over.
funded after Article 7. Article 7 comes first, which is what you're
Yeah, but
saying,
if the voters vote down 7 and vote in 8, what happens?
then there would be more fund balance.
And they didn't support the people, which,
I know, but I'm just saying, what happens if they say, what's 50% of the balance of 0?
Be honest, our main goal is to have 5-0 and 9-0 vote on Article 7, because that's what we all agreed on to kind of stop the up
Yeah.
and down.
I'm not disagreeing with that
I
at
think
all.
we have
I'm just
5-0,
saying,
yeah.
what happens if the taxpayers say no to 7? Does that make 8 and 9
No,
void?
No, there's more fund balance to
More
split
fund
up.
balance.
yeah.
So if I have 500 grand.
But you're asking to
178 for-
appropriate, so.
Yeah, but we're also using unassigned,
Yeah,
no, you're right.
you're using your
So-
own
Bob,
funds.
Bob,
I'm-
what would
I'm just-
happen, Bob, is if Article 7 failed,
Yeah.
Article 8 would wind up with a maximum of 125, and 9 would max with a 9 of 125. If 7 passes, then the remaining fund balance, which could be less than 125, would then be split
Right.
between 8 and 9.
Okay, and I don't dispute that. I'm just saying that they shouldn't be tied together at
So-
all, because you're talking about people and you're talking about reserve funds. I mean, you're talking about capital improvement and things like that. It's
So if I
just-
have 200 grand.
To a voter, it's gonna be very confusing.
So if I have 200 grand
Yeah,
at
it
the
is.
end, no, if I have 200 grand at the end,
Yeah, I understand that.
178 goes there, and then the remainder gets split between
I
8 and 9.
understand that. But if
I
it-
look at it as I hear what you're saying. I look at it in the phrasing of we're taking care of the people first, and then the maintenance and the project second.
So if they say no to 8 and 9, all that money goes into 7.
Well, it's
Oh,
up
goes
up
there
to
Goes there first.
But, I
7
mean,
would have
you
to
see,
happen
you
first.
see, it can create issues.
I don't know if it,
I mean,
to me, I don't think it does. 7 comes first. And even, I don't know if it
think
has
they
to
should
say
be
after
separate.
Article 7, but 7 comes first, they vote on that.
Yeah.
And then if there's any money left over, that's when it would go into 8 or 9.
you look at the way the town does it, we do expendable trusts, but they're not tied together.
They
We
don't
don't
have-
say so much, and it comes from
They
unassigned.
don't have the same, it's separate.
They're using their unassigned fund balance, with basically the year-end funds, surplus funds, or whatever you wanna
The same
call it. You can do whatever you want with it. I'm saying just separate them.
There's 3 different articles.
We,
I'm
we,
not- I'm-
well,
But they're
take it
tied
under-
together.
They're- So all of yours are tied together too, because it goes in order.
We
Yours
hear
go in
you.
order of
No,
the
it
funding.
doesn't. 7 can pass, 7 can fail, 8 and 9 can
But-
pass.
but-
8 and 9 is still gonna get funded,
Bob, to
but
his-
they're not getting more money.
Bob, to his point, I think the way the town articles are, because the way you all lay them out strategically, sequentially, is that's the order in which they're funded. Correct me if I'm wrong, right?
No, they're all individual. You can vote for one,
Because
not
they
for
have,
another, you can
they
do
have
whatever.
a $2 million fund balance. They don't need to order them a certain way, where the school does. They're gonna run out of money.
Well,
No, they have the money. They're using
They
the
might not have the
extra
money,
money
though.
to do this.
Yeah, but they might, that's the
Might
point, though,
not
they might
have
not
the
have the money.
No,
You have the money.
town one's coming
Be
from
real.
the,
We may not.
Doug, I always give you credit for being honest. You have the money.
We
Come on.
hear you.
okay, all right.
We hear you.
Any
I'm just saying
additional
they shouldn't be tied, that's all.
new
confusing.
discussion on Article 9?
You did bring up a point, though. It says vote to raise and appropriate. We don't need to raise the money. It's already raised, right?
they're
We're just
always
appropriating it.
written like
It's-
that.
It's part of the
Yeah.
wording and by the DRA, I believe.
I think it's you were trying to clarify and it ended up causing more
With
questions.
said funds to
That's
come
what you're
from.
asking
Yeah.
for.
All right. So wrapping our article discussion tonight. So we have gone through the school articles. For those still watching at home, we will
Thank you.
hold our budget hearing a week from today on Thursday, January 11th. Bond hearing at 6:30, budget hearing at 7, to be followed by a budget committee meeting where we will vote on Articles 2 through 9. And then we will be holding a special budget committee meeting on Thursday, January 25th, 7 p.m. here at Town Hall. Mr. Brunel has already confirmed space for us. Thank you, John. To finish discussions and voting on Article 1. All right, so we are closing that part of our agenda this evening. Member input, new business. Is there anything new to add for school facilities that we have not discussed already this evening? I know you mentioned there's a meeting on Wednesday where everything that we discussed earlier is going to be shared and presented. Mr. Oblinus, who has been faithfully sitting with us here this evening for 3.5 hours, is now a member of that committee.
Which, can I just say, I appreciate the school board opening it up to a citizen, because for a long time, the school board has been reluctant to do so.
Terry, we've been begging for something.
That's not,
Really? Because
Yes, we
I've
have.
had in the past that I've heard
Ryan, how long have we been begging?
that's, well, this is the first.
quite some time.
Yeah.
Really, because in the past, I've heard that it was shut out to
Should have asked me.
citizens.
There was
Just
an
to
ask.
you.
Join?
Just
Just to me. That could be. That very well could
It
be.
wasn't just you. Anything new for school facilities?
bickering tonight.
We haven't talked
I
about.
was at least saying thank you for including a citizen. Goodness.
Capital improvement has no updates. They haven't met since. Energy committee has no updates. Are we open for public input? Thank you, Mr. Oblinus. I will close
It's
public
past that
input. Next meeting, January 11th, budget hearing, budget committee meeting afterwards. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion carries 900. Have a
giving it a
great
chance.
evening, everyone.